There is a name this show never once says out loud. For 40 episodes across 2 seasons, you follow a 12-year-old boy in a blue pine tree cap. You watch him solve nearly every mystery a very strange town can throw at a child. And not once does anyone call him by the name on his birth certificate. They call him Dipper, after a birthmark shaped like a constellation, hidden up under his bangs where he hopes nobody will ever look. His real name is Mason, and the series keeps that quiet the way it keeps all of its best secrets folded just out of sight, waiting for the kind of person who reads to the end of the book. Tonight we are going through the whole of him, from the very first page he ever opened in the woods to the last morning he spent in Gravity Falls, and everything brave and frightened and tender in between. So get comfortable, turn the lights down low, you're here with Pine Hat, we will be here a while, and if you have not subscribed yet, it really does help us keep these coming. Let me start with the thing the series never lets him tell you, because everything else about him grows out of it. His name is Mason Pines. He was born on the 31st of August, 1999, in Piedmont, California, and he came into the world 5 minutes after his twin sister, which makes Mabel, and this surprises people the first time they hear it, the older of the two. 5 minutes is nothing, and 5 minutes is the whole story, because those 5 minutes are exactly the size of the gap he spends the entire series trying to close. The sense that he is always a little behind, always the younger one, always the one who has to work to be taken seriously while the world hands his sister its attention for free. The nickname came early, somewhere on his forehead, hidden under the bangs and under the cap, that becomes his single most recognizable feature. There is a birthmark, a scatter of freckle-like marks in the shape of the Big Dipper, the 7 stars of the constellation that everyone learns to find first because it points the way to everything else. Children being children, that became a name, Dipper, and it stuck so hard that by the time you meet him, the real one has almost dissolved. He introduces himself as Dipper, his sister calls him Dipper, his great uncle, the whole town, the journals, the credits, all of it, Dipper. The name Mason lives only in the supplementary material in the tie-in book that reprints the journal he carries. And it is worth being careful here, because this is exactly the kind of detail people love to get wrong. On screen, in the series proper, you never hear it. That silence is not an accident. A boy who hides his own forehead is a boy who is hiding, and Gravity Falls knew precisely what it was doing when it let his truest name stay under the hat. He is voiced by Jason Ritter, an actor who gives him this slightly cracked, eager, trying too hard quality that is perfect for the part. A voice that is always just about to either crack with excitement or crack with fear, and often both inside the same sentence. And the character himself was created by Alex Hirsch, who built the whole of Gravity Falls, and who has said more than once that Dipper is loosely a version of himself as a kid, the anxious, overprepared, monster-obsessed younger sibling. Mabel, in that same telling, is loosely based on Hirsch's own twin sister. So the emotional engine of this entire show, the bond between these two children and the slow terror of that bond having to change, is not a writer's room invention bolted on for drama. It is drawn, at least in outline, from the life of the person who made it, and I think you can feel that. There is a specificity to Dipper and Mabel that you do not get from characters assembled out of tropes. The way they annoy each other, the way they cover for each other, the private jokes and the shorthand, it reads like memory rather than design. Now, the look. You know it even if you have never watched a full episode because it became one of those silhouettes that outlived the show that produced them. The blue and white cap with a soft blue pine tree stitched on the front, worn low, the dark blue vest over an orange-red t-shirt, gray shorts, blue sneakers. It is a deliberately ordinary outfit, a normal kid's summer clothes, and that ordinariness is the point, because he is meant to be the audience's way in, the regular person standing in the middle of the impossible. But the cap is doing quiet work. In the series' Cipher language, the secret alphabet of symbols that runs through the opening titles and the end credits, and eventually turns out to be an actual plot device rather than decoration. Dipper's symbol is the pine tree. Every one of the main characters is a symbol on a wheel, and his is the tree on his hat, which means that from the very first frame of the very first episode, before you know anything at all, you're already looking at his emblem sitting on his head. The series is telling you who he is before he can. And who is he underneath the hat and the birthmark and the anxiety? Hirsch has described him in a way I keep coming back to. Roughly that Dipper is smart, but he is not a walking calculator. He is a real kid with real insecurities. That distinction matters more than it sounds. The lazy version of this character, the version a lesser show makes, is the boy genius, the little Sherlock, who is always right and always calm, and functions basically as a solution dispenser for the plot. Dipper's not that. He is clever, yes, obsessively so, a note-taker and a code-breaker, and a researcher who reads the footnotes. But he is also frightened and jealous and desperate to be liked and prone to overcommitting to a plan out of pride and then having to be rescued from it. He wants to be older than he is. He wants to be braver than he is. He wants a girl who is 3 years too old for him to see him as a man, and he wants his own uncertain body to hurry up and become the body of someone competent and unafraid. Gravity Falls' real subject, the thing under all the monsters, is growing up. And Dipper is the character who feels the pull of growing up most painfully because he wants it so badly and is so scared of what it will cost him. That cost has a name too, and the name is Mabel. Here is the tension that the entire 40-episode run is quietly built to detonate. Dipper wants to move forward, to become a teenager, to be taken seriously, to matter. Mabel wants time to stop, wants summer to last forever, wants the two of them to stay exactly as close as they are right now. They are twins, 5 minutes apart, and they are pulling in opposite directions along the one axis that matters most. And neither of them fully understands yet that you cannot grow up alone, that the very thing Dipper is chasing is the thing that will eventually pull him away from the person he loves most. That is the melancholy sitting under the summer adventure. And it is why a cartoon about a boy fighting gnomes can land like something much heavier. He is not just solving mysteries, he is running out of time to be a child, and he does not know it, and we do. His skill set is worth naming plainly, because it defines how he moves through every story. He is a cryptographer, which in a show this soaked in hidden codes is close to a superpower. He breaks ciphers, he keeps notes. He treats the world like a puzzle that will yield if he is only thorough enough. And most of his victories come not from strength, which he does not have, but from paying attention when nobody else will. That is the shape of his heroism. He is the kid who reads the manual. He is the one who notices the thing in the background. And very early on, that instinct hands him the object that will define his entire summer, the object I want to talk about next. Because everything that happens to Mason Pines happens because on one ordinary afternoon in the woods, he was the kind of person who stops to look at what other people walk past. He arrives in Gravity Falls, Oregon at the start of the summer of 2012, dropped off by parents who barely appear in the series to spend the season with a great uncle he has never really known. That great uncle runs a tourist trap called the Mystery Shack, a leaning wooden building full of fake attractions built to separate credulous visitors from their money. And the man who runs it, a squinting, fez-wearing old con artist the twins call Grunkle Stan, is himself one of the series' deepest secrets, though none of that surfaces for a long time. From Dipper's point of view at the start, it is simple and a little grim. He and his sister have been shipped off to a boring town in the middle of nowhere to be cheap labor for a relative, who mostly seems to want them to hand out flyers. It is the setup of 100 summer stories, the kid who thinks nothing will ever happen, and Gravity Falls plays that expectation straight for about 4 minutes before it detonates it completely. Because Gravity Falls is not a boring town. It is possibly the strangest place on the surface of the earth, a pocket of concentrated weirdness where the normal rules of reality have gone soft. And the reason for that, the deep cause under the whole series, is a thing Dipper will not understand for 2 full seasons. For now, all he knows is that the woods feel wrong, that his instincts are prickling, that there is something here the adults are not talking about. And then he finds the book. That is where the story of Dipper Pines really begins, not with his birth in Piedmont, but with a single afternoon in the pines, a hidden lever, and a journal bound in an old cover with a golden 6-fingered hand pressed into the front and the number 3 painted in its palm. He opens it, and the summer that was supposed to be nothing becomes the summer that made him. That is where we go next. The first episode is called Tourist Trapped, and it first aired on the 15th of June, 2012, and it does something clever that is easy to miss on a first watch. It gives the discovery of the journal to Dipper, and it gives the emotional crisis of the episode to Mabel, and it lets you see right away in the pilot exactly how these 2 children handle the same strange town in completely different ways. Dipper's out in the forest with one of those staple guns that the shack keeps around, putting up flyers because Stan told him to, and he finds a machine hidden in the trees, a hollow in a tree trunk that opens onto a lever, and the lever opens onto a hidden compartment, and inside the compartment is the book. That is the whole of his origin as a monster hunter right there, a boy who investigates instead of leaving. He blows the dust off the cover, and there is that gold hand with 6 fingers and the number 3, and inside, page after page of careful handwriting and unsettling drawings and a warning, in the very first entries that in Gravity Falls nobody can be trusted, that there is something evil in these woods, and that whoever is reading this is now in danger. Think about what that does to a 12-year-old who already believes in his bones that the world is stranger and more dangerous than the adults will admit. It is the biggest and most frightening thing that has ever happened to him. The journal is written by someone the book only ever refers to obliquely at first, an unnamed author who was clearly clever and clearly afraid, who studied the town's anomalies and cataloged its creatures, and then, mid-sentence, stopped writing, as though something came for him before he could finish. For most of the first season, the identity of that author is the show's central mystery, the question that pulls Dipper forward through every episode. Who wrote this? What happened to them? And the answer, when it finally comes, reshapes everything. But we are not there yet, and neither is he. For now, the journal is simply the greatest thing he has ever held, a field guide to the impossible. And he treats it the way a devout person treats scripture. He carries it everywhere. He reads it by flashlight. He trusts it at times, more than he trusts the living people around him. And that trust is going to be tested in ways he cannot imagine. The rest of Tourist Trapped is Mabel's, and it is worth walking through because it establishes the pattern of the whole show. Mabel, who has decided that this summer is going to be the summer of romance, meets a boy she is instantly smitten with. A strange, stiff, oddly cold boy named Norman, and the horror comedy engine of the episode is Dipper, slowly becoming convinced, journal in hand, that Norman is not what he seems, that he might be a zombie. He is wrong about the specifics and right about the danger, which becomes his signature, by the way, being wrong about the details and right about the threat. Norman turns out to be several gnomes stacked inside a coat, a small army of them, and they want Mabel to be their queen, and the climax is the two of them fighting off a gnome monster together, and Mabel, in the end, is the one who deals the finishing blow, feeding the gnome king into a leaf blower. That last beat matters. The pilot could have let Dipper save his sister with his book and his cleverness. Instead, it lets Mabel save herself and lets the two of them win as a pair. And it ends on the image of the twins choosing each other, choosing the weird summer together, over the normal one they thought they wanted. That is the series' thesis in miniature in its very first outing. Whatever comes, they face it together. What I love about the gnome episode as a starting point for Dipper specifically is how it sets up his relationship to fear. He is not fearless. He is afraid almost constantly. But he has decided that the fear is not a reason to stop, that the correct response to a mysterious lever in a tree is to pull it and see. And that instinct is going to nearly get him killed a dozen times over, and it is also the single most admirable thing about him. Bravery in this show is not the absence of fear. It is a scared kid doing the thing anyway because he has decided the mystery matters more than his own comfort. And the journal becomes both the fuel and the excuse. As long as he has that book telling him there is more to find, he has permission to keep walking into the dark. There is a small object in that first episode that pays off much, much later. And it is the kind of thing this show does constantly, so I want to flag the habit now rather than each time. Gravity Falls plants things, details in the background, symbols in the credits, a line of dialogue that seems throwaway and turns out to be load-bearing 2 years later. Gravity Falls trusts you to be watching the way Dipper watches, closely, greedily, going back over things. So when I tell you across tonight that a particular moment was set up long in advance, understand that this is not me reaching. It is the actual method of the series, and it is the method Dipper himself uses to survive. He is, in a real sense, a stand-in for the ideal viewer. He is the person who re-watches. He is the person who decodes the credits. When the real-world fans of this show organize themselves into a genuine puzzle-solving community, cracking the ciphers hidden in every episode, they were, without quite realizing it, doing exactly what Dipper does inside the story. The character and the audience are engaged in the same activity, and that overlap is much of why he became so beloved. To watch Gravity Falls carefully is to be Dipper. From here, the summer opens up into a run of episodes that are, on the surface, a Monster of the Week format, and it would be easy to treat them as filler on the way to the big mythology. I do not think they are. And I want to resist that reading because those early episodes are where the series does the patient work of building who Dipper is before it starts putting him under real pressure. The second episode, The Legend of the Gobblewonker, which aired at the end of June 2012, sends the twins and the shack's handyman out onto the lake chasing a rumored monster. And it is ostensibly a goofy lake cryptid romp. But underneath it is about Dipper's need to be believed, his frustration at being a kid whose theories adults wave away. He wants the monster to be real, partly because a real monster would prove that his whole way of seeing the world is correct, that he is not paranoid, that the strangeness he feels is out there and not just in him. That craving to be validated, to be right in front of people who dismissed him, is one of his least heroic and most human traits, and the early episodes keep poking at it. The fourth episode, The Hand That Rocks the Mabel, which aired in early July of that first summer, introduces the character who becomes Dipper's first real human antagonist. And it is telling that Gravity Falls' first sustained villain is not a monster from the journal, but another child. His name is Gideon Gleeful, a round, white-haired little boy in a powder blue suit who runs a wildly popular psychic act in town, the Tent of Telepathy, and who presents himself to the public as an adorable, angelic gift from heaven. He is, in reality, a manipulative, vindictive, and truly dangerous kid with a monstrous temper and an obsessive streak. And the engine of his introduction is that he becomes infatuated with Mabel. Dipper spends the episode uneasy about Gideon in a way the adults dismiss, because Gideon is small and cute and popular, and once again, Dipper is the one who senses the threat that no grown-up will take seriously. Mabel, too kind to hurt Gideon's feelings by rejecting him outright, gets trapped in a spiral of not being able to say no. And when she finally does, Gideon's mask comes off, and the pleasant little psychic reveals himself to be capable of real cruelty. What is interesting about Gideon as a mirror for Dipper is that they are, in some ways, the same kind of person pointed in opposite directions. Both are small, both are underestimated, both are clever, both feel that the world does not give them the respect they deserve, and both are in love, or think they are, with someone. But where Dipper's insecurity makes him try harder, study more, protect the people he loves, Gideon's insecurity curdles into entitlement, into the conviction that the things he wants are owed to him and that anyone standing between him and them deserves whatever he does to get them. Gideon is what Dipper could become if his fear of being small ever tipped over into resentment. The show never states that out loud, but it is there in the design, in the way the two of them recognize each other as rivals almost immediately. And crucially, Gideon has a journal too, one of the three, though we do not understand the significance of that for a long time. There is a whole conspiracy folded into that cute little psychic act, and Dipper is one of the only people in town who instinctively refuses to buy it. Then comes The Inconveniencing, an episode from the middle of July that I think is one of the sharpest early studies of Dipper's central weakness, which is his desperate wish to be older, and specifically to be old enough for Wendy. Wendy Corduroy is the 15-year-old girl who works the cash register at the Mystery Shack. Laid back, funny, effortlessly cool in the way that 15 looks to 12. And Dipper has a crush on her that is so large it becomes one of the defining threads of the entire first season. In The Inconveniencing, Wendy invites him along with her older teenage friends to hang out at an abandoned, supposedly haunted convenience store. And Dipper, terrified of seeming young, spends the whole night trying to act cool, trying to be one of the teens, laughing at things he does not find funny, pretending not to be scared when he is scared. And of course, the store really is haunted by the ghosts of an old couple who despise teenagers, and the ghosts nearly kill everyone. And Dipper only saves the day by doing the exact opposite of what he has been doing all episode. He stops pretending to be a cool teenager. He embraces being a goofy little kid, doing an embarrassing dance because the ghosts have decided to spare anyone who is clearly not a rotten teen. His salvation is accepting, for one moment, that he is a child. I find that episode subtly devastating in retrospect, because the lesson it teaches him does not stick, and the series knows it will not stick because that is how being 12 works. You learn that it is okay to be your age, and then the next morning you wake up and you want to be older again because the wanting is not rational, it is a hunger. And no single good night talks you out of a hunger. Dipper will spend the rest of the series relearning this same lesson in different costumes, and the fact that he has to keep relearning it is not a writing flaw, it is the truth about growing up. Nobody learns it once. And underneath the ghost comedy, there is Wendy, who treats Dipper with genuine warmth, who likes him, who has no idea the size of what he feels, and whose kindness is, without her meaning it to be, a kind of slow torture for him, because every friendly gesture feeds a hope that cannot go anywhere. The Wendy Crush deserves its own honest accounting because it is one of the parts of Gravity Falls that people remember most and one of the easiest to get wrong. Dipper is 12 turning 13. Wendy is 15. That gap, which is small enough to be nothing between adults, is enormous between a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old, and the series is completely clear-eyed about this. The crush is never presented as something that should or could work out. It is presented as real, as painful, as the first big unrequited feeling of a young life, and it is treated with a tenderness and a maturity that is really rare in children's television. Gravity Falls does not humiliate him for it, and it does not pretend it will come true. It lets it be exactly what it is, a boy loving someone he cannot have, learning slowly and unevenly how to carry that. We will get to how it resolves because it does resolve, and the resolution is one of the more emotionally intelligent things the series ever does, but it matters to say up front, since people misremember it constantly, that Dipper and Wendy never become a couple. That was never on the table. The crush is a lesson in wanting, not a romance being delayed. Dipper versus Manliness, which aired later in July, takes the boy's anxiety about being small and grown up and points it straight at the question of masculinity. And it is one of the funnier episodes about one of the more serious things. Dipper, stung by feeling weak and unmanly, goes looking for the secret of manliness and finds a tribe of enormous, absurd creatures called the Manitors, half man and half bull, who embody the loudest, dumbest, most aggressive possible version of masculinity, all grunting and violence and refusing to feel anything. They agree to train him, and for a while he buys into it completely, because he wants so badly to be a man that he will accept a cartoon of manhood as the real thing. The turn comes when they demand that he prove his manliness by killing a harmless creature, and he refuses, and they mock him for it. And in refusing, he discovers what the episode has been driving at all along, that real manliness, whatever that even means, is not about being the biggest and cruelest thing in the room. It is about the strength to do what you believe is right, even when everyone around you calls you weak for it. He walks away from their version of manhood and is more of a man for walking away. I think this is one of the show's cleverest moves, and I want to give it credit because it takes a young boy's genuine and slightly embarrassing anxiety, the fear that he is not manly enough, and instead of either mocking it or indulging it, it uses that anxiety to say something true and gentle about what manhood actually is. Dipper does not need to be a Manitor. He needs to be exactly what he already is, a small, brave, kind kid who thinks for himself. And the series is careful never to resolve his insecurity permanently, because if it did, there would be no character left. He learns the lesson and keeps the anxiety, and that combination, knowing better and still feeling the pull, is the truest thing about him. In August of that first summer comes an episode that fans quote endlessly and that tells you more about Dipper than almost any other single half hour, and it is called Double Dipper. The premise is pure comedy on the surface. The Mystery Shack throws a party, Wendy is there, Dipper wants desperately to work up the nerve to ask her to dance, and in a moment of panic he discovers a strange photocopier in the back of the shack that can copy living things, and he copies himself, producing an entire team of identical Dippers to help him orchestrate the perfect plan to impress her. The clones are made of paper, they dissolve in water, and the very first one he makes, the one who becomes the ringleader, names himself Tyrone, because of course a clone of Dipper would immediately want a different name, would want to be his own person, would feel the exact same itch to be more than a copy of someone else that the original feels every day. And that is the joke that turns out not to be a joke. The Dipper clones start as helpers and end as a threat, because each of them wants Wendy too. Each of them believes he is the real Dipper, and therefore the one who deserves her. And the plan collapses into the copies turning on him and on each other. It is a farce, and it is also, if you look at it straight, a boy so consumed by the fear of not being enough that he literally multiplies himself trying to engineer a girl's affection, and it blows up in his face because you cannot scheme your way into being loved. And because the parts of himself he is trying to hide, the anxiety, the calculation, the willingness to manipulate a situation to get what he wants, do not go away when you copy them. They multiply. There is an honestly poignant beat near the end where Dipper and Tyrone, original and copy, sit together as Tyrone slowly melts in the rain, And Tyrone, dying, gives Dipper advice, tells him to just be himself, and hands over the last of his plans and dissolves into a puddle, a boy sitting with a dying copy of himself who is more at peace than he is. For a Disney cartoon, that is a remarkably strange and sad little image, and I think it is among the more underrated moments in the whole first season. What Double Dipper crystallizes is that Dipper's problem with Wendy was never really about Wendy. It is about him. It is about the fact that he does not believe the person he actually is, the small, anxious kid, is enough to be wanted, so he keeps trying to present a managed version, a cooler version, a version assembled out of plans and copies and performances. The tragedy of the crush is that the more he schemes, the further he gets from the honesty that might have actually let Wendy see him clearly, not as a boyfriend. That was never possible, but as a friend worth having. And the series is patient enough to let him fail at this over and over before it lets him learn it. A week later comes Irrational Treasure, which pairs Dipper with Mabel on a conspiracy hunt into the town's history. And it is a lighter episode, but it feeds the mythology in a way that matters for understanding how Dipper's mind works. The two of them stumble onto a cover-up involving the founding of Gravity Falls and a ludicrous, brilliant historical figure named Quentin Tremblay, a disgraced would-be president preserved in peanut brittle, and the episode is a romp. But it plants the idea that runs under the whole series, which is that the official story of this town is a lie, that there is a hidden history deliberately concealed by powerful people, and that the truth is written in codes and buried in documents for someone patient enough to dig. That is catnip to Dipper. He is a boy built to distrust the official story, to assume there is a real version underneath the sanctioned one. And Irrational Treasure rewards that instinct while also gently being about Mabel, about the ways her seemingly frivolous nature is actually a strength, about the twins as a team where his suspicion and her spontaneity solve things neither could solve alone. Then, at the end of August, The Time Traveler's Pig, which is one of the deceptively important episodes for the twins' relationship, and also the one that gives Mabel her pig. A time traveler named Blendon Blandon, a bumbling agent from the future in a suit that lets him move through time, drops his time travel device in Gravity Falls, and Dipper gets hold of it. And the episode becomes a story about Dipper using time travel over and over to try to fix a single embarrassing moment in front of Wendy. He keeps rewinding, keeps trying to engineer the perfect version of the day, and every time he changes his own outcome, he changes Mabel's. Because in the timeline where he gets his perfect moment, Mabel never wins Waddles, the pig she falls instantly and totally in love with at the fair. So Dipper is faced with a choice, and it is a real one, his own happiness against his sister's. And after all his scheming, all his desperation to make things go his way, he chooses Mabel. He lets go of the perfect version of the day so that she can keep her pig. Waddles goes home with them and stays, and the episode ends with the two of them together. And it is the first time Gravity Falls makes explicit the trade that defines Dipper's whole arc, that when it truly comes down to it, when it is his want against her happiness, he chooses her. He will make that same choice at infinitely higher stakes at the very end of the series. This is the small rehearsal for it. I love that the vehicle for that lesson is a pig. It would be easy for the emotional climax of a time travel episode to be grand, and instead the thing Dipper sacrifices his perfect moment for is Mabel getting to keep a slightly ridiculous pink pig she has known for a single day. But that is exactly right, because Mabel's love is like that, immediate and total and a little absurd, and Dipper, protecting it, choosing it over his own carefully engineered happiness, is him loving his sister on her own terms rather than his. Waddles, by the way, becomes a genuine member of the family, and I mention this because people sometimes assume the pig gets left behind or handed off when the summer ends. He does not. Waddles goes home to California with the twins. The pig is family, and the series means it. September brings Fight Fighters, which returns to the Wendy situation, but through the lens of Dipper's rivalry with Robbie, the older teenage boy who is dating Wendy and who treats Dipper with the casual contempt that older boys reserve for younger ones sniffing around a girl they consider theirs. Dipper, humiliated and furious, ends up with a video game fighter come to life, a character named Rumble McSkirmish who agrees to fight Dipper's enemy. And the episode is a comedy about a boy's jealousy summoning a literal violent avatar to solve his romantic problem for him. But the turn is Dipper realizing he does not actually want Robbie hurt, that the fantasy of winning through force is empty, and that his jealousy has led him somewhere he does not want to go. It is another of the show's studies in how Dipper's insecurity, when it curdles, points him toward the wrong kind of power, and how he keeps pulling back from the edge, keeps choosing not to be the person his worst feelings want him to be. He is a good kid in the specific and hard-won sense that he keeps deciding to be one over and over against the pull of his own resentments. Little Dipper, later that month, is a Gideon episode and a size episode, involving crystals that can shrink or enlarge whatever their light touches, and it is largely comedy, Dipper shrunk down, and having to survive at insect scale, but it keeps the Gideon threat warm, keeps reminding you that the cute little psychic has not gone away and is still circling the shack, still wanting the building and the journal and Mabel and revenge. And then Summerween, an off-season Halloween episode set in a town so obsessed with the holiday that it celebrates a summer version of it, which is mostly a delightful horror comedy about a monster that eats children who are not sufficiently into the spirit of the holiday, but which also, characteristically, has an emotional core about Dipper being embarrassed to still enjoy something childish, trick-or-treating in front of Wendy and the older kids, and learning, again, that there is nothing shameful about liking the things a kid likes. It is the same lesson as the inconveniencing wearing a different mask, and I point that out not as a criticism, but because the repetition is the meaning. Gravity Falls keeps making him choose between the dignity of seeming grown and the honesty of being young, and it keeps, gently, coming down on the side of letting him be young a little longer, because it knows, even when he does not, how little of that time he has left. As the first season moves into its back half, which aired across the winter and spring of 2013 after a break, the series starts pushing on the twins' relationship harder, and the clearest example is Carpet Diem, an April episode built entirely around Dipper and Mabel swapping bodies. The mechanism is a room in the shack with an old carpet that carries a static charge capable of switching two people's minds into each other's bodies. And the emotional setup is a fight, the twins arguing over a private room, each convinced the other has it easier, each unable to see the other's life from the inside. And then, through the carpet, they get two. Dipper spends the episode as Mabel and Mabel as Dipper, and the comedy of the two of them trying to imitate each other well enough to fool everyone is deeply funny. But the point of the episode is what they learn by wearing each other's lives. Dipper discovers that Mabel's constant sunniness is not the effortless thing he assumed, that she works to be that open, that being Mabel is exhausting in ways he never appreciated. Mabel discovers something about the weight Dipper carries, the way his mind never stops, the low hum of worry he lives inside. What Carpet Diem is really about, underneath the body swap gags, is empathy between siblings who love each other and still fundamentally do not understand each other. And it ends with the two of them deciding they would rather share a room than be apart, choosing closeness over privacy, which is a very Mabel resolution, and one that Dipper, at this point in the summer, is still willing to accept. It is worth holding on to that, because the whole tragedy of the finale is that the closeness the twins keep choosing here, easily, warmly, in a dispute over a bedroom, is going to become the thing they cannot easily choose anymore once growing up forces its way in. In Carpet Diem, choosing each other costs nothing. Later, it will cost everything, and they will still, mostly, choose it. The series is teaching you the value of the thing before it threatens to take it away. Boys Crazy, a couple of weeks later, is a Mabel-heavy episode about a boy band that turns out to be made of clones controlled by a manager, and it runs a Wendy and Robbie plot alongside it in which Dipper meddles in their relationship. And it is one of the episodes where Dipper is not especially admirable, where his jealousy leads him to interfere in a way that is sincerely a violation of Wendy's autonomy. He discovers that Robbie has used a manipulative, almost hypnotic song to keep Wendy interested. And rather than simply telling Wendy the truth and letting her decide, Dipper engineers a breakup. And the episode is honest enough to have Wendy call him out for it, to have her point out that even if Robbie was manipulating her, it was her choice to make, not his. That is a strikingly mature thing for a kids' show to say to its protagonist, that his love for someone does not entitle him to make decisions about her heart, and it is one of the moments where Gravity Falls quietly refuses to let Dipper off the hook just because we are meant to like him. His feelings for Wendy are real, and they also sometimes make him behave badly, and the series is willing to hold both truths at once. The last stretch of the first season starts to pull the mythology to the surface. Land Before Swine in late June of 2013 is largely a Stan and Mabel episode about Waddles being carried off by a pterodactyl, but it deepens Stan's relationship with the twins, shows the con man's buried tenderness, and it is one of the episodes that starts building toward the revelation that Grunkle Stan is a far stranger and more secret figure than he appears. And then the show drops its first real mythology bomb, and it drops it on Dipper in an episode called Dreamscaperers. Dreamscaperers, which aired in July of 2013, is the first appearance of Bill Cipher, and it is worth slowing down for, because Bill is the figure who ends up defining the back half of the entire series, and who becomes, in the finale, the thing everything has been building toward. Bill is a triangle. He is a floating, one-eyed, black and yellow triangle with a little top hat and a bow tie and a chipper, wheedling, carnival barker voice. And he is one of the more unsettling villains ever put in a children's cartoon precisely because he is so friendly, so funny, so casual about the horrors he describes. He is a dream demon, a being from the mind who can enter dreams and thoughts, make deals, possess the unwary, and see, he claims, everything. And in Dreamscaperers, Gideon, still scheming to get the combination to the shack's safe and the deed to the building, summons Bill and hires him to invade Stan's mind and steal the code. Dipper, Mabel, and Seuss follow into the mindscape to stop him, and the episode becomes a story of Grunkle Stan's memories, which is its own quiet revelation, glimpses of a sad and complicated past the con man never talks about. And the confrontation with Bill establishes the rules that will matter enormously later. Bill deals in bargains. Bill lies with the truth. Bill is, he cheerfully explains, playing a much longer game than anyone realizes, and he leaves with a warning that a great darkness is coming, that Dipper and his friends have no idea what is really going on, and that Bill will be watching. For a first-season cartoon villain, that is an extraordinary note to end on. He does not lose in any final sense. He withdraws, having gotten a look at the players, having planted a seed of dread, and he tells the audience essentially that the real story has not even started. And the thing that gets me about that first Bill appearance is how completely it recontextualizes the series on rewatch. Everything before it plays like a Monster of the Week adventure. Everything after it is happening under the eye of something that already knows how it ends. For Dipper specifically, Bill is the arrival of an enemy he cannot out-research. His whole method, his one real power, is that he can figure things out, that patience and cleverness and the journal will eventually yield the answer. Bill is the thing the journal warns about and cannot defend against, a being who trades in exactly the currency Dipper is weakest in, which is trust and deals, and the willingness to believe that someone offering you a shortcut is telling the truth. From Dreamscaperers on, the smartest kid in Gravity Falls is up against something that is smarter, older, and playing a game whose rules he will not fully understand until it is almost too late. And it is no accident that when Bill finally strikes his most personal blow against Dipper, later in the series, he does it by exploiting precisely Dipper's overconfidence in his own cleverness. But we will get there. The first season ends with Gideon Rises in early August of 2013, and it is the payoff of the entire Gideon arc. Gideon finally gets his hands on what he has been scheming for the whole season, tricking and blackmailing his way into taking the Mystery Shack from Stan, throwing the family out, and revealing that he has been building toward this for a long time. And in the course of the episode, Gideon reveals that he has a journal, the second of the three, and that he knows there is a first, and that the journals together point to something enormous. Dipper realizes that his journal, number 3, is one of a set, and that whoever wrote them hid them apart on purpose, and that the mystery he has been living inside all summer is far larger than the town, larger than the monsters, tied to some grand hidden design. Gideon is defeated, the shack is won back, largely through Mabel and the family and the town rallying, but the real ending of the season is quieter and lands right on Dipper. He learns that Gideon's journal and his journal are 2 of 3, and the season closes on the dawning understanding that the author, the mysterious figure whose warnings have guided his whole summer, is a real person with a real plan, and that the story is only half told. The second season begins in August of 2014 after a long wait, and it opens with an episode called Scary Oak that immediately raises the stakes and changes the texture of Gravity Falls. The government has taken notice of Gravity Falls. 2 agents, a pair called Powers and Trigger, arrive to investigate the town's anomalies, and suddenly Dipper's private obsession, the strangeness he has spent a whole summer cataloging in secret, is a matter of official interest, which means the danger is no longer just monsters, it is exposure. Dipper, thrilled to finally have adults who might take the weirdness seriously, tries to prove the anomalies are real, and it goes catastrophically wrong, summoning a horde of zombies and nearly getting everyone killed. and Stan has to intervene in a way that hints, again, at how much the old man knows and is hiding. The season is announcing its intentions. The comfortable Monster of the Week rhythm is over. From here, the mythology is the series. The second episode of the season, Into the Bunker, is the one that finally resolves the Wendy Crush, and it does so with a grace that I still think about. Dipper, Mabel, Wendy, and Seuss discover a hidden bunker in the woods built by the author of the journals, and the exploration of it becomes a survival story as they are hunted by a shapeshifter, a creature that can take any form, that has been trapped down there for decades. But threaded through the monster plot is the emotional one, because Dipper has decided, or been pushed by Mabel, to finally tell Wendy how he feels, and the episode keeps delaying the confession the way real life delays these things, until finally, cornered, frightened, thinking they might not survive, he says it. And Wendy's response is the thing that makes the episode great. She tells him she already knew. She was not oblivious, she saw it, and she was kind enough to never make it weird. She tells him she is flattered, that he is a great guy, and that it cannot happen because she is 15 and he is 12. And that gap is real, and it matters. And none of that means she thinks less of him. She wants to stay friends, and Dipper, to his enormous credit, takes it. He is disappointed, of course, but he does not sulk, does not lash out, does not decide she owes him anything. He accepts the answer and keeps the friendship. And the two of them are, from that point on, actually close in a way that is better and more durable than the fantasy ever could have been. I keep coming back to how unusual that is, because children's television is full of crushes that are either played entirely for laughs or strung along until they improbably come true, and Gravity Falls does neither. It treats a 12-year-old's first big heartbreak as something worthy of real emotional seriousness, and then it lets that heartbreak resolve into a mature friendship, which is an unmistakably rare and valuable thing to model for the kids watching. Dipper wanted Wendy. He could not have her. He was told so honestly and kindly, and instead of the world ending, he found that the friendship underneath the crush was real and worth keeping. That is one of the healthiest arcs about unrequited love I have seen in anything aimed at children, and it says a lot about the series' respect for its audience that it was willing to spend a beloved season-long thread on the lesson that sometimes the answer is no, and you survive it, and the person is still your friend. With the crush resolved, the season is free to turn Dipper toward the larger mystery, and it does so through a shapeshifter that, in the bunker, taunts him by taking the form of the author, dangling the answer to the question that has driven him all along, who wrote the journals, before snatching it away. Dipper does not get his answer here. What he gets is confirmation that the author is real, was down in this bunker, built things, ran experiments, and vanished, and that the truth is close enough to be used against him. The shapeshifter's final trick is to take a form calculated to hurt, and it is a foretaste of the way the season's real villain, Bill, will keep using Dipper's own desires and certainties as the weapon against him. Then, a few episodes into the season, comes Sock Opera, which is one of the darkest and most important Dipper episodes in the entire series, and the only time in the show that Bill Cipher takes over Dipper's actual body. The setup braids two plots together with real cruelty. Mabel is putting on a puppet show, a sock puppet rock opera, to impress a boy she likes, and she needs Dipper's help. And Dipper, meanwhile, has found a laptop belonging to the author, a device that might finally contain the answers he has spent the whole series chasing, and it is locked, password protected, and he cannot crack it. He is so close to the truth and blocked by a password, and that frustration is just the opening Bill has been waiting for. Bill appears to Dipper in a dream and offers a deal. Bill will give Dipper the ability to get into the laptop, will hand him the answers he craves in exchange for a puppet, a seemingly trivial thing, one of Mabel's puppets, and Dipper, exhausted and desperate and blinded by how badly he wants the mystery solved, agrees. And the puppet Bill wanted was a vessel. The deal was never about the puppet. Bill uses it to seize Dipper's body, kicking Dipper's consciousness out and taking the wheel, and for much of the episode, the character walking around in Dipper's clothes is not Dipper at all. It is the Dream Demon. Gleeful and clumsy in a human body, referred to by fans as Bipper, working to destroy the journal so that Dipper can never use it against him. It is genuinely disturbing to watch. This small familiar body, moving wrong, grinning wrong, harming itself carelessly because it does not care about the vessel. And it is a horror that lands specifically because the series has spent so long making you love the kid whose body is being violated. And here's what makes Sock Opera cut so deep as a Dipper story. He gets possessed because of his single defining flaw, his obsession, his conviction that solving the mystery is worth almost any price. He literally signs his own body away to a demon because he cannot stand to be one password short of the truth. And the resolution is the exact inverse of that flaw. It is Mabel who saves him, and she saves him not through cleverness, but through love, refusing to give up on her brother even when Bill, in Dipper's body, tries to trick and manipulate her. And in the climax, Dipper regains control long enough for the two of them to work together. And Mabel, given the chance to expose the author's laptop and get the answers Dipper wanted, instead chooses to save her brother. And Dipper, back in his own body, realizes what his obsession nearly cost, and destroys the very thing he had bargained everything for. He gives up the laptop, gives up the shortcut to the answers to be free of Bill and to be with his sister. The mystery loses to the person. That is the whole show in one episode. The season keeps deepening the mythology through the autumn of 2014. Society of the Blind Eye, an October episode, uncovers a secret organization in Gravity Falls dedicated to erasing memories, wiping out any townsperson who learns too much about the town's true nature, using a device that removes specific memories entirely. Dipper and his friends discover the society hidden beneath the town's museum, and the revelation reframes everything about why nobody in Gravity Falls seems to notice the constant weirdness. They have been made to forget. It is a truly unsettling idea, an entire community kept ignorant by force, their own memories stolen to protect a secret, and it lands hard on Dipper because he is a boy whose entire identity is built on knowing, on refusing to forget, on writing everything down. A machine that erases memory is, to him, almost a personal violation, an attack on the one thing he values most. And the episode also cracks open the backstory of a character who has hovered at the edges of Gravity Falls, an old hillbilly inventor named Fiddleford McGucket, whom the town treats as a raving lunatic, and reveals that his madness is not natural. He was the one who built the memory gun, and he used it on himself, over and over, trying to erase things he had seen that were too terrible to live with. And in doing so, he erased his own mind to pieces. It is a heartbreaking origin, and it plants, though we do not yet know it, a crucial piece of the endgame because McGucket was the author's assistant, and what he saw, the thing so awful he chose to forget it, is tied directly to the portal and the demon and everything that is coming. Then, in November, Blendon's Game brings back the time traveler and gives us a look at where Dipper and Mabel come from. And it does something lovely and a little sad by taking the twins back to their own birthday. It is established here on screen that Dipper and Mabel share a birthday, the 31st of August, which means their 13th birthday is going to fall on the very last day of summer, and the episode uses time travel to send them back to witness a birthday from their early childhood, a really tender glimpse of the two of them as very small children, already inseparable, already a unit. What Blendon's Game understands is that the twins are approaching a threshold, that 13 is coming, that the birthday at the end of the summer is going to be a door they walk through into being teenagers. And it lets them and us look back at where they started before that door arrives. There is a warmth to it, and there is a dread under the warmth, because a birthday at the end of summer is also a countdown, and the series never lets you forget that summer and childhood are running out. Around this stretch, Gravity Falls also gives Dipper some quieter, more social episodes that are easy to overlook, but that track his development. He is, across the second season, slowly becoming a little more comfortable in his own skin, a little less frantic. In Roadside Attraction, later in the season, he even goes through a phase of overconfidence with girls, having absorbed some bad advice about how to talk to them. And it becomes a comedy of a boy who has swung from crippling shyness to obnoxious smoothness without ever passing through honesty. And the episode gently corrects him, reminds him that the manipulative version of confidence is just a different kind of dishonesty, that the girls he is trying to charm are people, not conquests. It is the same lesson the show has been teaching him about Wendy, rephrased. Real connection does not come from a technique. It comes from being a person and letting yourself be seen. He keeps having to relearn it because it is honestly one of the hardest things a person ever learns. But the episode from this stretch that I think most changes how you see Dipper is Northwest Mansion Mystery, which aired in early 2015 and which pairs him with Pacifica Northwest, the wealthy, snobbish girl who has spent the series as a minor antagonist, the rich, mean kid who looks down on Mabel and everyone else. The setup is a ghost haunting the Northwest family's enormous mansion during an exclusive party, and Pacifica, frightened, secretly hires Dipper to get rid of it. What the episode uncovers is the rot under the Northwest family's wealth. The ghost is the spirit of a lumberjack the Northwest's wronged generations ago, a man who died because the family broke a promise to the town, and the haunting is a reckoning for that old cruelty, and Pacifica, raised by cold, controlling, contemptuous parents to be exactly like them, is confronted with the question of whether she is doomed to become her family or whether she can choose to be something better. Dipper's role in this is gently one of his finest hours because he treats Pacifica not as the villain the series has trained us to see, but as a person trapped in a life she did not choose. And he tells her in essence that she does not have to be what her parents made her, that she gets to decide what kind of person she is, and she chooses. In the climax, she defies her parents, breaks the old family pattern, does the decent thing, and the ghost is laid to rest not by Dipper's cleverness, but by Pacifica's choice to be better than her name. It is a real turn for her character, from antagonist to something like an ally, and it is built on Dipper's fundamental decency, his willingness to see the person under the reputation. Now, I want to be careful here, because this episode is the seed of a great deal of fan speculation. A lot of viewers wanted Dipper and Pacifica to become a couple, and the pairing has a devoted following, but I have to be honest about what is actually on screen, which is friendship and mutual respect, not romance. The series never makes them a couple. Whatever warmth is there stays in the actual series at the level of two kids who started as enemies and ended with genuine regard for each other. The romance is something fans built on top of that foundation, and it is a lovely thing to imagine, but it is imagination, not canon, and I would be doing you a disservice to blur that line. What Northwest Mansion Mystery does for Dipper's own arc is show how far he has come. The boy who spent the first season desperate to be seen as older, cooler, more impressive, is here the steady one, the one who sees clearly, the one who helps another kid find her better self. He is growing up, and Gravity Falls is letting it happen not through some sudden transformation, but through accumulated small choices, each episode leaving him a little more himself. And that steadiness is about to be tested by the largest revelation the series has been hiding, because the mystery he has chased since the very first page, the identity of the author, the truth about his own great uncle, the secret at the center of the whole town, is finally, after 2 seasons, about to break open. The episode is called Not What He Seems. It aired in March of 2015, and it is the hinge on which the entire series turns. For 2 seasons, the series has let you assume you understood Grunkle Stan. He is the gruff old con man, the cheapskate who runs a tourist trap full of fakes, greedy and grumpy, and underneath it, secretly fond of the twins. That is the Stan you think you know. Not What He Seems takes that Stan apart. The government agents close in, they arrest Stan, and they reveal to Dipper and Mabel a file that shatters their picture of him. Evidence that their great uncle is not who he says he is, that his identity is fake, that he has been lying to them about something enormous. And then the twins discover what Stan has been hiding in the basement of the shack all along. A machine, an enormous, humming, dangerous machine, the thing the whole town's weirdness has been leaking from, a portal. And Stan has been secretly running it, feeding it, working toward activating it, for reasons he will not explain. The climax of the episode is among the more tense and emotionally loaded sequences in the show because the portal is counting down to activation, and activating it might tear the town apart, might be a catastrophe, might be exactly the doomsday the journals warned about. And Dipper, journal in hand, everything he has read screaming that this is dangerous, that Stan cannot be trusted, that they have to shut it down, lunges for the shutdown button, and Mabel does not. Stan, desperate, begging, tells them to trust him, tells them he is doing this for a reason he cannot explain, asks his great niece and nephew to believe in him against all the evidence. And Dipper cannot, because everything he knows says the machine is a threat. It is Mabel who makes the leap. It is Mabel who stops Dipper, who chooses, on nothing but faith in the man who has cared for them all summer, to let the machine finish. And it is worth being precise about this because people misremember it. Dipper wanted to hit the button. Mabel's the one who trusted Stan. She chooses love over the evidence, and the machine completes its cycle, and out of the light of the portal steps a man. He looks exactly like Stan, older, wearing a long coat with the same face, the same build, and he has 6 fingers on each hand. This is the author. This is the man who wrote the journals, whose warnings have guided Dipper's entire summer, whose identity has been the central mystery of the series, and he is Stan's identical twin brother. His name is Stanford Pines. And the Stan the twins have known all along, the Grunkle. Stan, who runs the shack, is not Stanford at all. He is Stanley, the other brother, who has been impersonating his own twin for 30 years, living under his brother's name, running his brother's house, keeping his brother's terrible machine secret, all in a desperate, decades-long effort to bring the real Stanford back from wherever the portal sent him. The revelation is staggering on a first watch because it recolors literally everything. Every scene with Stan, every con, every evasion, every locked door was a man carrying an impossible secret and an impossible guilt. And crucially for our purposes, it means the author Dipper has idolized. The mysterious genius whose journal he has treated as scripture is real, is alive, and has just walked into the mystery shack. The follow-up, A Tale of Two Stans, which aired that summer, stops the plot entirely to tell the story of the two brothers, and it is the emotional bedrock of the whole series, the episode that explains everything. Stanford and Stanley Pines grew up together in a seaside town, poor, in a cramped apartment, two halves of a whole, inseparable the way Dipper and Mabel are inseparable. And that parallel is the entire point because the story of the great uncles is a warning about the story of the twins. Stanford was the gifted one, brilliant, driven, marked by his 6 fingers as different, and Stanley was the scrappy, funny, loyal one who was not book smart but who loved his brother more than anything. And their bond broke. In a moment of jealousy and carelessness, Stanley damaged a school project of Stanford's that might have won him a place at a prestigious college, and the damage cost Stanford his future, and their father threw Stanley out of the house. And the two brothers, who had been everything to each other, were torn apart, one going off to become a lonely genius, and the other becoming a drifter and a con man, and they spent decades estranged nursing the wound. Stanford, the genius, eventually came to Gravity Falls, drawn by its anomalies, and it was here that he did his great work, cataloging the town's mysteries in the journals, and it was here that he made his catastrophic mistake, the mistake that is the true origin of everything, because Stanford, alone and arrogant and hungry for a partner who could understand his genius, was contacted in his dreams by a being who called itself a muse, who flattered him, who offered him knowledge and inspiration, who helped him design a machine that would tear a hole between dimensions. That being was Bill Cipher. Bill used Stanford for years, posing as a benevolent muse, feeding him the plans for the portal, and Stanford, blinded by the flattery of being chosen, did not see the truth until it was nearly too late, that Bill wanted the portal open to let his own kind through, to bring about the end of the world. When Stanford finally understood, he tried to stop, and in the struggle to shut the project down, an accident at the portal pulled him through it, hurling him into the space between dimensions, where he was lost for 30 years. And it was Stanley, the estranged brother, who received Stanford's desperate final message, who came to Gravity Falls, who found the machine and the journal, and who, unable to bring his brother back but unable to give up, took Stanford's name and Stanford's life and spent 30 years secretly rebuilding the portal, running the con of the Mystery Shack to fund it, keeping the whole thing hidden, driven by guilt and love and the refusal to accept that he had lost his twin forever. That is the story sitting under the entire show, and once you know it, Gravity Falls is a different and much sadder thing, because the great uncles are what the twins could become. Two brothers, closer than close, one brilliant and driven, and one loyal and overlooked, torn apart by a single moment of resentment and jealousy, and spending the rest of their lives paying for it. And Dipper and Mabel are living right now, this very summer, through the pressures that broke Stan and Ford. Dipper is the driven one who wants to grow up, to be taken seriously, to pursue the mysteries. Mabel is the one who wants to hold on, and the specter that A Tale of Two Stans raises, without ever saying it aloud, is that the twins are standing exactly where their great uncles once stood, at the edge of a rift that could swallow the next 30 years of their lives. Gravity Falls has just told you, in the form of two broken old men, exactly what is at stake in whether Dipper and Mabel can grow up without growing apart. With Stanford back, Dipper's world changes in a way that is at first the answer to his every dream and then, slowly, something more complicated. For 2 seasons he has worshipped the author, an abstraction, a mind he knew only through handwriting and diagrams. Now the author is a real man standing in the shack, and that man, Grunkle Ford, is everything Dipper has ever wanted to be. Ford is brilliant, is fearless, has traveled between dimensions, has fought things Dipper has only read about, and Ford is impressed by Dipper, sees in this small, clever, anxious boy a kindred spirit, a mind that works like his own. For Dipper, this is intoxicating. He has spent his life feeling underestimated, feeling like the overlooked one. And here is a genius, a legend, who looks at him and sees not a kid to be humored, but a colleague to be taken seriously. Ford treats Dipper as an equal, as a fellow investigator, and it fills a hole in Dipper that has been open the entire series. The episode Dungeons, Dungeons, and More Dungeons, which aired in the summer of 2015, is the sweetest expression of this new bond, and it is deliberately, pointedly about Dipper, finding someone who shares his particular flavor of nerdiness. Dipper and Ford discover that they both love the same intricate fantasy role-playing game, a dice and rulebook adventure of the sort that other people find impossibly dorky. And they bond over it with pure delight. Two people who have each felt alone in their intelligence finding in each other someone who gets it. The plot spins out into a magical creature, a being called Probabilitor, who deals in probability and threatens to trap them. But the heart of the episode is just the joy of Dipper and Ford connecting. And it is deeply moving to watch this lonely boy find a mentor and this lonely old man find a protege, each recognizing in the other the person they wished they had had. There is real happiness in it. And that happiness is exactly what makes what comes later so painful. Because the series is building this relationship up precisely so that it can put it in tension with the other relationship that matters, the one with Mabel. Because here's the trap the series is faintly setting. Ford is a warning, wearing the mask of a dream. Everything Dipper loves about Ford, the brilliance, the fearlessness, the total dedication to knowledge, is also the thing that destroyed Ford's life. Ford became the lonely genius. Ford pushed away the brother who loved him, chased the mysteries at the cost of every human connection, and let his hunger to be recognized as special make him vulnerable to the flattery of a demon. Ford is what happens when a boy like Dipper grows up prioritizing the work over the people. And Gravity Falls is going to make Dipper choose before the summer ends between becoming Ford and staying with Mabel. And it spends these middle episodes of the season making the Ford path as seductive as possible so that the choice will actually cost something. The Stanchurian Candidate, later that summer, is more of a Stan and Ford episode, a comedy about a mind control tie that Ford invented being used to run Stan for local office. But it keeps developing the tension between the two brothers, the way Stanley resents that Stanford came back and immediately reclaimed the role of the impressive one, the way 30 years of estrangement do not heal just because the portal finally opened. And that unresolved bitterness between the great uncles is not a side plot. It is a loaded gun because at the climax of the entire series, the plan to defeat Bill is going to depend on Stan and Ford being able to work together. And their inability to stop bickering, their old wound, is going to be the thing that nearly dooms everyone. The show keeps showing you the brothers failing to reconcile, and it keeps drawing the parallel to the twins, and it wants you to be afraid, on both timelines at once, of what happens when brothers who love each other cannot bridge the distance between them. But the key episode of this middle stretch, for Dipper specifically and for the endgame, is The Last Mabelcorn, which aired in September of 2015 because it is the episode where Ford finally sits Dipper down and tells him the truth about Bill Cipher. Up to now, Dipper's knowledge of Bill has been fragmentary, a scary triangle from a dream, a demon who possessed him once. Ford gives him the full horror. Ford explains that Bill is not just a monster, but a being of almost incomprehensible power and malice, an entity from the mind who has been manipulating events in Gravity Falls for a very long time, who deceived Ford himself, who wants nothing less than to break reality open and let his kind pour through. And Ford reveals what he did to protect himself because after Bill used and betrayed him, Ford took extreme measures to make sure the demon could never get inside his mind again. He had a metal plate installed in his skull, a barrier that makes it impossible for Bill to read his thoughts or possess him. This detail sounds like a throwaway piece of grim characterization, but hold on to it, because it turns out to be the mechanical key to the entire finale. The reason the heroes cannot simply solve the Bill problem the easy way later is sitting right here in this episode. Ford's warning to Dipper is unambiguous, and it is the emotional center of the episode. He tells the boy, in effect, never trust Bill, never make a deal with him, never believe a word he says, because Bill's entire method is to find what you want most and use it as the hook. And Dipper, who has already been burned by exactly this, who signed his own body away to Bill in sock opera out of desperation to solve a mystery, understands in his gut what Ford is warning him about because he has lived it. The two of them, mentor and student, share the specific bond of two clever people who were both nearly destroyed by their own cleverness, both seduced by the promise of knowledge, both taught the hard way that Bill offers you your deepest desire precisely so he can turn it into a leash. It is a bond built on a shared wound, and it makes Dipper trust Ford completely, makes him want more than ever to be like Ford. And that trust and that wanting are exactly what Bill is going to exploit to tear the family apart. And then comes the episode that everything has been building toward, the one that finally forces the choice the entire series has been circling, and it is called Dipper and Mabel versus the Future, and it aired in October of 2015, and it is, for my money, the most heartbreaking half hour the series ever made because nothing supernatural has to happen for it to hurt. It hurts on the level of two children and a calendar. The setup is deceptively gentle. The twins' 13th birthday is approaching, the last day of summer, and Mabel's in a state of anxious denial about the fact that summer is ending, that they will have to go home, that everything is about to change. She spends the episode trying to plan the perfect end of summer party, trying to freeze this moment because for Mabel, the summer in Gravity Falls has been the happiest time of her life and she cannot bear for it to be over. And running alongside her denial is the thing that breaks her because Ford in private makes Dipper an offer. Ford tells Dipper that he sees his potential, that Gravity Falls needs a protector, someone to guard its secrets and study its anomalies after Ford is gone, and he offers Dipper an apprenticeship. He offers him the chance to stay in Gravity Falls, to not go home to California, to spend his life doing exactly what he has dreamed of doing all summer, learning from the author, becoming the next great investigator of the impossible. It is everything Dipper has ever wanted, handed to him by the man he most admires. And Dipper is tempted. That is the crucial, painful thing. He does not immediately say no. He is a 12-year-old boy who has spent his whole life feeling small and overlooked. And here is a genius telling him he is special, offering him a future of meaning and adventure and respect, and part of him wants it with his whole heart. He goes to talk it over, to think about it, sincerely weighing whether to stay behind in Gravity Falls, and Mabel overhears. Mabel hears her brother, her twin, the person she has never in her life been apart from, considering staying behind, considering a future that does not include going home together, and it destroys her. Because Mabel has understood all along, on some level Dipper has been able to avoid, that growing up means growing apart, that the door of 13 leads to a world where they will not always be together, and here is the proof arriving early, her own brother ready to leave her behind for the summer to never end for him and not for her. And she cannot say any of this, so she just carries it, this crushing fear, into a day where she is already frantic about the end of summer. There is a piece of plot machinery in the episode that becomes the trigger for the apocalypse, and it is worth explaining because it is the mechanism of everything that follows. Ford has been guarding a thing called the Rift, a crack in the fabric of reality itself, a small contained tier left over from the portal, held in a snow globe-like container, and it is enormously dangerous because if it were ever to break, it would tear reality wide open and let Bill's dimension flood into ours. Mabel is entrusted, more or less by accident, with carrying it. And it is in this state, devastated over Dipper, terrified of the future, desperate for anything that would let her hold on to the summer, that Mabel is approached by a stranger who seems to understand her, who offers her sympathy, who tells her he has a way to make the summer last forever. That stranger is Blendon Blandin, the time traveler, or rather it appears to be Blendon. And Mabel, in her misery, listens to him because he is saying the exact thing her breaking heart wants to hear, that time can be stopped, that summer does not have to end, that she does not have to lose her brother. But it is not Blendon, it is Bill Cipher wearing Blendon's body, and this is the culmination of everything Ford warned about, because Bill has done exactly what he always does, found the person's deepest desire and used it as the hook. He found a frightened girl who wanted the summer to never end, and he offered her precisely that. And in exchange, he asked her for the thing she happened to be carrying, the Rift. And Mabel, not understanding what it was, tricked and grieving and desperate, handed it over. And Bill took it and broke it. Broke. The Rift shatters, reality cracks open, and Bill Cipher, who has been confined to the mindscape for the entire series, unable to touch the physical world, finally gets his way in. That is how Weirdmageddon begins. Not through Dipper's obsession, not through some villain's frontal assault, but through a heartbroken 12-year-old girl being offered, by a demon in disguise, the one thing she wanted most in the world. I think this is one of the quietly brilliant and cruel pieces of storytelling in the whole series, and I want to be fair to Mabel about it, because it would be easy to blame her, and Gravity Falls is very careful not to. Mabel did not do anything selfish or stupid in the ordinary sense. She was manipulated, expertly, by an ancient demon who had studied her, wearing the face of a friend, at the single most vulnerable moment of her life, a moment that Dipper's temptation to leave her had helped create. The apocalypse is not Mabel's fault, and it is not Dipper's fault, but it grows directly out of the thing the series has been worried about the entire time, the fear of growing apart, the pain of the twins pulling in different directions. Bill did not create that fear. He just found it, already there, and used it as a crowbar to pry reality open. The end of the world begins as a family tragedy. Two children who love each other and cannot say the thing that would have kept them together, and a monster who was watching and waiting for exactly that gap to appear. Weirdmageddon arrives in 3 parts across the last stretch of the series, from October of 2015 to the finale in February of 2016. And it is unlike anything the series has done before, because it drops the Monster of the Week structure entirely and becomes a single sustained apocalypse. The moment the rift breaks, the sky over Gravity Falls tears open, and Bill Cipher pours through into the physical world for the first time, and he gets exactly what he has wanted for a very long time: a body, a physical form, the ability to touch and reshape reality itself, and he does reshape it. The laws of physics stop working. The sky becomes a wound. Bill builds himself a throne out of the frozen, screaming bodies of the townspeople, brings his own kind through the tear, and turns Gravity Falls into a nightmare kingdom where he is a god. There is one important limit on this catastrophe that the show is careful about, and I want to be accurate about it because it changes the meaning of the finale. Weirdmageddon is contained. Bill's power, for reasons tied to the strange geography of Gravity Falls itself, cannot spread beyond the town. An invisible barrier forms at the edges of Gravity Falls, and Bill and his monsters cannot cross it. The outside world goes on, largely unaware that a corner of Oregon has fallen into hell. This is not a global apocalypse, it is a local one, a single town swallowed by weirdness while the rest of the planet carries on. And that containment is both a mercy and a torment for Bill, who has the power of a god and a prison the size of a county. It also means the stakes of the finale, while cosmic in feeling, are intimate in scale. This is about saving a town, a family, a summer, not the earth. The opening of Weirdmageddon is a plainly frightening piece of television, and it lands hardest on the twins because it lands on their separation. In the chaos of the rift breaking, Dipper and Mabel are pulled apart, and Mabel, fleeing, ends up captured, sealed by Bill inside a prison he designed specifically for her. A giant bubble, a sphere of pink light floating in the sky. And this is where Bill's cruelty becomes psychological rather than physical, because the bubble is not a cage of bars, it is a fantasy. Bill traps Mabel inside a perfect dream world, a bubble where it is always summer, where she is always happy, where nothing ever changes, and she never has to grow up, and she never has to lose her brother. He gives her exactly the thing she wanted so badly that she handed him the rift for it. A summer that never ends, and he uses it as a prison, because a prison made of your own deepest wish is a prison you might never want to leave. Meanwhile, Dipper is alone in the ruins, and this is a version of the character we have not really seen, because the boy who has always had his sister, always had the journal, always had a plan, has none of those things now. The journals are gone, Bill has destroyed them, burned them, so Dipper's one great tool, his field guide to the impossible, the thing that made him feel capable, is ash. His sister is trapped in the sky, the town is a nightmare, and Dipper, cold and starving and terrified, has to become something he has never quite been, which is a leader who acts without a book to tell him how. He finds the other survivors, Wendy among them, hardened and resourceful, and Seuss, and the two of them and a ragtag group of townspeople who have escaped Bill's freezing, and Dipper, this small, anxious kid, starts to organize a resistance. There is a real growth in this, and it is not the growth he wanted. He wanted to grow up by becoming Ford's apprentice, by being anointed special. Instead, he grows up the hard way, by losing everything that made him feel safe and having to keep going anyway for his sister's sake, because she is up there in a bubble and he is going to get her back. The second part, Weirdmageddon 2, called Escape from Reality, is the rescue of Mabel, and it is one of the more emotionally direct hours Gravity Falls ever did, because it is entirely about the twins and the thing that came between them. Dipper, with Suze and Wendy, breaches the bubble and goes inside Mabel's dream prison, and what he finds is horrifying in a soft way because Mabel is happy. She is in her perfect world, surrounded by fantasy versions of everyone she loves, an endless summer that adores her, and part of her knows it is not real and wants to stay anyway, because the real world is the world where summer ends and her brother leaves her behind. Bill's genius is that the prison does not need locks. Mabel is staying because she's afraid of the truth, and Dipper has to convince his own sister to give up paradise and come back to a world that is currently ending. And the way he does it is the emotional heart of the entire series. Dipper does not lecture her. He tells her the truth about what he overheard about the apprenticeship, and he tells her that he understands now why she was so scared, and then he makes her a promise. He promises that he is not going to take the apprenticeship. He promises that he is not going to abandon her, that whatever growing up looks like, whatever the future holds, he will always be there for her, that they will face it together, that he chooses her over the future Ford offered. He gives up in that moment the thing he wanted most in the world, the dream of staying in Gravity Falls and becoming the next great investigator, and he gives it up not because he was forced to, but because he finally understands that no future is worth losing his sister. And Mabel, hearing her brother choose her, is finally able to let go of the false paradise and come back to the real, broken, dangerous world, because the real world has Dipper in it, and that is worth more than any endless summer. They embrace, and the bubble breaks, and the twins walk out of the dream together, reconciled, whole, and ready to fight. I have to say plainly that this is the moment the whole show was built for. And it is the payoff of every small choice Dipper has made along the way, every time he chose Mabel over his own want, from the pig in the first season onward. All of it was practice for this, the moment when the stakes are as high as they can possibly be, and he still, without hesitation, chooses his sister over his dream. The apprenticeship was the biggest temptation the series could offer him, the perfect trap, everything he ever wanted, and he turns it down, and he turns it down for her, and in doing so, he refuses to become Ford. Refuses to become the lonely genius who chose the work over the person. The great uncle's tragedy was two brothers who let the rift between them grow until it swallowed 30 years. Dipper and Mabel, standing at the edge of the same rift, reach across it. That is the whole point of Gravity Falls, and it happens here. And I do not think the series ever tops the quiet enormity of a boy telling his sister that no version of the future is worth being without her. The finale is called Weirdmageddon 3, Take Back the Falls, and it aired on the 15th of February 2016, and it is the end of everything, the last episode of the series, an hour that has to pay off 2 seasons of setup and does. With Mabel rescued and the twins reunited, the survivors regroup, and the plan to defeat Bill comes together. And it draws on the deepest layer of the series' design, the thing that has been hiding in plain sight in every single episode from the very beginning. The opening titles of Gravity Falls always ended on a wheel, a circle of 10 symbols surrounding Bill's cipher, and for the entire run of the show, fans assumed it was decoration, a bit of atmospheric mystery box imagery. It was not. It is a prophecy and a weapon. The wheel, it turns out, is a real thing drawn by Ford, and each of the 10 symbols represents a specific person. And the prophecy holds that if all 10 people stand together on the symbols and join hands, they will complete a circle of energy powerful enough to destroy Bill's cipher. Dipper's symbol, of course, is the pine tree, the emblem that has been on his hat since the first frame of the first episode. Mabel is the shooting star. Suze is the question mark. Ford is the 6-fingered hand. Stan, Wendy, McGucket, Pacifica, Robbie, and Gideon fill out the rest of the wheel, an unlikely coalition of everyone the twins have met and befriended and even fought over the course of the summer. All of them gathered in one place for the one thing that can stop the apocalypse. The The series has been showing you the solution in its opening credits every single week for 2 years, and you did not know it, and neither did anyone in the story, and that is the kind of long game design that makes Gravity Falls what it is. To even get to Bill, the heroes need to reach him, and this produces one of the great images of the finale, the Shacktron, in which the mystery shack itself, the leaning wooden tourist trap that has been home all summer, is transformed into an enormous walking robot, a mech built from the building, protected from Bill's reality-warping power by a substance the series has established as one of the few things Bill cannot corrupt, unicorn hair, which forms a barrier he cannot see through or breach. So the family climbs into their own home-turned-war machine and marches it across the ruined town to confront the demon, the mystery shack literally standing up to fight for the people inside it. And there is something perfect about that, about the con man's fake attraction becoming the thing that saves the world, about the home being the weapon. They reach Bill and they get the 10 of them onto the wheel and they join hands and the circle begins to work, the energy building, Bill visibly afraid for the first time, and it should end right there, cleanly, the prophecy fulfilled. And it does not, because of the loaded gun Gravity Falls has been keeping cocked for the entire second season, the unhealed wound between Stan and Ford. At the critical moment, the two brothers standing next to each other on the wheel start to argue. Old resentment, 30 years of it, boils up at the worst possible instant, and they let go of each other's hands to bicker, and the circle breaks and the weapon fails. The one thing that could destroy Bill is undone by two old men who cannot stop fighting long enough to save the world. And it is a gut punch because the series warned you over and over that the brothers' inability to reconcile was dangerous. And here it costs everyone everything. Bill, freed, seizes the moment and captures them all. So the heroes lose the clean way and they have to win the hard way, and the hard way is a con, which is fitting because the man at the center of it has been running a con his entire life. With the wheel broken and the family caught, Bill triumphant, it is Stan and Ford who improvise the plan that actually works, and it hinges on the detail from the last Mabel corn, the metal plate in Ford's skull. Bill has always wanted access to Ford's mind because Ford knows the equation, the piece of knowledge that would let Bill spread his apocalypse beyond the barrier and out into the whole universe. But Bill cannot get into Ford's mind because of the plate, so the brothers offer him a trade. Ford appears to surrender, appears to agree to let Bill into his mind to give him what he wants, and Bill, greedy and overconfident, takes the deal and dives into the mind he has been locked out of for 30 years. Except it is not Ford's mind. In the moment before the two brothers switch, Stan and Ford, identical twins, swap clothes and places, and the man Bill dives into is not Ford at all. It is Stan. And Bill, realizing too late that he has been conned, that he is trapped inside the mind of the wrong brother, the brother whose mind holds no cosmic equations, only a lifetime of memory, begins to panic and to lash out, tearing through Stan's mind, trying to escape. And this is the moment of the sacrifice, and I want to be very precise about it, because it is the emotional climax of the entire series. And it is one of the details people most often get wrong. The plan is to destroy Bill by destroying the mind he is trapped inside. And the way to do that is the memory gun, the same device from Society of the Blind Eye, the machine that erases memory completely. Ford fires the memory gun. Ford is the one holding it. Ford is the one who pulls the trigger, and the shot erases Bill Cipher, wipes him out of existence along with everything else inside Stan's head. And Stan volunteered for this. Stan knew that letting Bill into his mind and having it wiped meant that his own memory, his entire self, every moment of his life, his brother, the twins, everything he was, would be erased along with the demon. He agreed to it anyway. He chose to sacrifice his own mind, his own identity, to save his family and the world, and he sat there and let his brother pull the trigger on him. That is the ending of Bill Cipher, at least as far as the series proper shows us, erased in the mind of the man who loved his family enough to give up his self to protect them. And it is worth pausing on the horror and the beauty of it braided together, because the demon who has haunted the show since the first season, the being of near infinite power, is not defeated by a superweapon or a chosen one or a clever gadget. He is defeated by a con, run by an old fraud, powered by a love so total that a man was willing to erase his own soul to protect the people on that wheel. Bill's whole philosophy was that everything is meaningless, that reality is an illusion, that nothing matters, and he is destroyed by the one thing his nihilism could never account for: a person choosing to give up everything he is for someone else. Stan beat the demon not with power, but with the exact thing Bill could not understand or corrupt, which is love that asks for nothing back. The aftermath of the battle is where Gravity Falls earns its tears, and Dipper is at the center of it. With Bill gone, the frozen townspeople thaw, the sky heals, Weirdmageddon ends, reality knits itself back together, and the family gathers around Stan, who is alive, physically unharmed, and completely blank. His mind is gone. He does not know his own name, does not recognize Ford, does not know the twins. The man who saved them all is a stranger to himself, staring at the people who love him with polite confusion, and the victory curdles into grief, because this is the price, this is what Stan gave, and for a moment it looks like it might be permanent. Like the cost of the win is that they get the world back but lose the man who bought it for them. And here's where the series does something that could have felt cheap and instead feels earned, because the family refuses to accept it. Mabel, above all, but all of them, set about trying to bring Stan back, and the tool they use is not science or magic, but memory itself, love as an act of stubborn reconstruction. Mabel has kept a scrapbook all summer, photographs and mementos of every adventure, every silly moment, every piece of their time together, and the family sits with Stan and shows him the scrapbook, tells him the stories, walks him back through his own life, one picture at a time. And slowly, against the odds, it works. Waddles, the pig, is part of it, some flicker of recognition, and the accumulated weight of a summer's worth of love and evidence starts to bring the man back to himself. His memories return, most of them gradually, and the series is gentle and slightly open-ended about exactly how complete the recovery is, which I think is the honest choice, because a mind erased and rebuilt from a scrapbook is not going to be exactly the same as it was, and the series does not pretend otherwise. But Stan comes back. He knows them again. He is himself again, or himself enough, and the family is whole. And it is among the more moving resolutions Gravity Falls could have given. The idea that a person is, in some real sense, the sum of the love and the memories other people hold of them, and that as long as the people who love you refuse to forget, you can be brought back even from having forgotten yourself. And then, with the world saved and Stan restored, comes the thing the whole series has been counting down to, the end of summer, and it arrives on the calendar with no monster attached, which is exactly why it hurts. The 31st of August comes, and the twins turn 13, and it is a bittersweet birthday because it is also the last day, and the next morning, the 1st of September, they have to go home. Their parents are expecting them back in Piedmont. School is starting. The summer is over, truly over, in the ordinary way that summers end. And after everything, after gnomes and ghosts and time travel and a literal apocalypse, the thing that finally separates the twins from Gravity Falls is the plainest force in the universe, the end of a school break. There is a party, a real one this time, the whole town, everyone they have come to love. And then there is a bus stop, and there are goodbyes, and the show does not flinch from how much it hurts to leave. The goodbyes are where the aftershocks of Dipper's arc land. He says goodbye to Wendy, and it is a good goodbye, warm and real and free of the old ache. Two friends who have been through the apocalypse together, and she gives him her hat. A small gesture that means everything, an acknowledgement that he is not the same anxious kid who arrived, that he has earned her genuine respect. He says goodbye to Ford, and this one carries the weight of the apprenticeship he turned down, the future he chose not to have. And there is no bitterness in it, because Ford, of all people, understands what Dipper chose and why. Understands that the boy chose his sister over the work in a way Ford himself never managed to at that age. And I think there is something almost like pride in the old genius, watching this kid make the choice that might have saved Ford's own life if he had made it. Dipper's not going to become the lonely genius, he is going home with his twin. And Ford knows that is the right ending, even though it means letting go of the protege he found. And the town keeps going without them, which is its own kind of grace note. Suze, the loyal, gentle handyman who has been family all along, becomes the new owner of the Mystery Shack, inheriting Stan's tourist trap and running it with the same love, if not the same larceny, So the shack lives on, a home that stays a home even after the twins leave it. And Stan and Ford, the two brothers, finally actually reconciled, healed by having faced the apocalypse side by side, do the thing they dreamed of doing as boys before life tore them apart. They buy a boat and they sail off together to hunt anomalies and treasure and adventure across the world. Two old men who lost 30 years to a rift between them and are determined to spend whatever they have left together. That is the answer the series gives to the tragedy of A Tale of Two Stans. The brothers who grew apart find each other again. It is not too late. And that reconciliation is in a way a gift to the twins, a proof that even the worst estrangement can heal. That growing up and growing apart does not have to be permanent. That Dipper and Mabel, watching their great uncles sail off as best friends, can carry forward the hope that whatever distance the years put between them, they too can always find their way back. The very last image of the series is the twins on the bus, leaving Gravity Falls, older, changed, together. And Waddles is with them because, of course, the pig comes home, he is family, and there was never any question of leaving him behind. And Gravity Falls ends there, on a departure, which is the only honest way for a story about the end of childhood to end, because childhood does end, summers do end. And the measure of them is not that they last, but that they were real while they happened, and that you carry them with you after. Dipper Pines arrived in Gravity Falls a frightened boy desperate to be older, and he leaves it still a kid, 13 years old, but a different kind of kid, one who has been to the edge of the world and chosen, at the edge, the person he loves over everything he wanted. That is the whole of his arc in the series proper. He wanted to grow up, and he did, and growing up turned out to mean learning what he was not willing to lose. Now, the series ended in 2016, but the story of Dipper Pines did not entirely stop there because Alex Hirsch has continued to add to the canon in the years since, through books rather than episodes, and those books are where a few of the story's most tantalizing pieces actually live. There has been no third season, and I want to be clear about that because people sometimes assume the additional material means the series came back. It did not. Gravity Falls is 2 seasons and 40 episodes, and it is what came after are companion books, and they are canon, and they fill in edges the series left blank, and they are worth walking through carefully because this is precisely the sort of supplementary material where it becomes easy to blur what is confirmed with what is only hinted. The first is the book known as Journal 3, published in the summer of 2016, which is a physical reproduction of the actual journal Dipper carries throughout the series, the real object, printed and bound so that fans can hold the thing the character held. It is written mostly in Ford's voice since Ford is the author, but it includes annotations in the margins from Dipper, Mabel, and Seuss, comments they scribbled in the book during the summer, which means it doubles as a kind of after-the-fact diary of the twins' adventures. And it is in this book, in the supplementary material rather than in any episode, that Dipper's real name is confirmed on the page. Mason. It is not spoken in the show, ever, but the companion book makes it official that the boy everyone calls Dipper was born Mason Pines, and that the nickname comes, as we said at the very start, from the birthmark. I find it fitting that Gravity Falls itself never says it, and a book has to, because it keeps faith with the idea that has run under this whole character, that his truest self is the hidden one, the one you only find if you go looking past the surface, past the hat, into the material most people never read. The bigger and stranger book is The Book of Bill, published in 2024, written by Alex Hirsch in the voice of Bill Cipher himself. And it is canon, and it is the closest thing the franchise has given to a real epilogue for the whole story, including for Dipper. It is written as if Bill is speaking to you, the reader, wheedling and manipulating and boasting in exactly the demon's voice, and it does several enormous things. First, it finally reveals Bill's origin, which the series never explained. Bill, it turns out, was not born a demon of the mindscape. He came from a place called Euclidia, a 2-dimensional world, a flatland, a universe of pure geometry, and he was, in the beginning, something like a person there, with parents, with a home. And he destroyed it. The book tells us that Bill obliterated his entire home dimension, killed his own world and everyone in it, including his parents. An act the book frames not as simple malice, but as a catastrophe. He set in motion and could not stop. One he has spent 1 trillion years pretending was a triumph so that he would never have to feel it. and that this unimaginable guilt, this genocide of his own reality, is the wound underneath everything Bill became. His nihilism, his insistence that nothing matters and reality is a meaningless illusion, reads very differently once you know he is a being who destroyed his own world and cannot bear to have destroyed something that mattered. So he decided, as a defense against unbearable guilt, that nothing matters at all. It is an unmistakably tragic origin for a villain who spent the whole series being pure gleeful menace, and it recolors him the way A Tale of Two Stans recolored Grunkle Stan. I should be careful to keep two things separate here because it is easy to conflate them, and Gravity Falls is precise about it. Euclidia is Bill's birth dimension, the two-dimensional world he came from and destroyed a very long time ago, described as something like 1 trillion years back. The Nightmare Realm, which is the term the series uses, is the place Bill was based out of during the events of the series, the collapsing dimension from which he schemed his way toward invading ours. They are not the same place. Euclidia is his origin, the Nightmare Realm is his base of operations, and blurring them together, as some retellings do, gets the geography of the character wrong. His home was Euclidia. It is gone. He made sure of that himself. The second enormous thing the Book of Bill does is clarify Bill's fate, and this matters for how you understand the ending of the series, because the show made it look like Bill was simply erased, destroyed in Stan's mind, gone. The book complicates that. It reveals that Bill's final act, in the instant before his erasure, was to send some essential part of himself somewhere else, and that he ends up not annihilated but imprisoned, sealed in a kind of prison or tank, outside of space and time, associated with the deity that the series has hinted at in its deepest lore, the Axolotl, a vast, ancient, godlike being tied to the cosmic rules of the setting. So Bill is not dead in the clean sense. He is contained, locked away, powerless but existing, which leaves the door open, deliberately, the way this show always leaves doors open. The demon who tormented Dipper is not gone from the universe. He is in a cell outside of reality, and the story, in the largest sense, is not fully closed. And crucially for us, the Book of Bill contains a section where the people Bill wronged get to speak back to him, get to write their own responses, and Dipper, Mabel, and Stan each in turn tell Bill, in essence, what they will do to him if he ever finds his way back. It is a satisfying inversion, the demon who spent the whole series holding all the power reduced to reading threats from the children who beat him. And Dipper's contribution is very much in character, the clever kid who studied his enemy promising that he will be ready, that he knows how Bill works now, that the boy who was possessed and tricked and nearly broken is not that vulnerable anymore. It is the closest thing to a final word we get from adult-facing Dipper, and it is defiant, and it is earned. Now we come to the question that fans ask more than almost any other, which is what happens to Dipper when he grows up, what his adult life looks like, and here I have to be honest with you in a way that a lot of the videos about this character are not, because the truthful answer is that we do not really know, and most of what circulates as fact about adult Dipper is fan invention or careful reading between very few lines. The series ends with him at 13 on a bus leaving Gravity Falls. There is no on-screen account of him at 20 or 30. There is no confirmed college, no confirmed career, no confirmed adult version of the character at all in the series proper. The companion books drop a small handful of hints, and they are worth mentioning precisely because they are hints and not facts, and the difference matters. The Book of Bill, in its wandering, taunting way, gestures at possible futures, dreams, and fragments, and among the things fans have pulled out of it are a suggestion that Dipper, at some point, has a dream about legally changing his name to Pines, which, if you sit with it, is a poignant idea. A boy who spent his childhood hiding behind a nickname, eventually wanting to be defined not by Mason or by Dipper, but simply by his family, by the surname he shares with the sister he chose over everything. Though I would stress that a dream referenced in a book written in a demon's unreliable voice is a fragile thing to build a biography on. There are glancing references that fans have read as pointing toward Dipper eventually being in a relationship, growing into someone more confident, but again, these are wisps, not confirmed accounts, and I'm not going to stand here and narrate an adult life for Dipper Pines that the canon has not actually given us, because that is exactly the sort of confident invention that turns a story about a real character into fan fiction wearing a documentary's clothes. What we can say, honestly, is directional rather than specific. The trajectory the series establishes for Dipper is a boy learning that his worth is not conditional on being older or cooler or more impressive. Learning that intelligence is a gift only if it does not cost him the people he loves. Learning to be brave without being reckless and clever without being arrogant. Whatever adult he becomes, the series has told you the shape of him. A person who chooses connection over ambition, who would rather be with his sister than be a lonely legend. If you want to imagine his future, imagine it in that direction, but hold it loosely as imagination, because Gravity Falls, wisely I think, chose to leave him at the threshold rather than follow him across it. The most powerful thing about the ending is that he is still becoming, still open, still 13, with the whole thing ahead of him. And to pin down exactly who he becomes would be to close a door the story deliberately left ajar. I actually think that ambiguity is a feature, not a gap. There is a temptation, with a beloved character, to want every question answered, every year of their life filled in. And Gravity Falls understood something that a lot of franchises forget, which is that a story gains power from what it withholds. We do not need to see adult Dipper to know he turned out okay, because we watched him make, at 13, the choices that determine whether a person turns out okay. The kid who picked his sister over the apprenticeship, who accepted a no from Wendy with grace, who refused the Minotaur's cruelty in the Demon's deals, who kept walking into the dark because the mystery mattered but always came back to the people who mattered more. That kid is going to be all right, and you do not need a sequel to know it. The character is complete without being finished, and that is a rarer and more valuable thing than another season would have been. Let me turn now from what happens to Dipper to something underneath the whole character, a layer of the show that Dipper embodies more than anyone. And that is the Cipher layer, the codes, the sense that in Gravity Falls, everything means something, because this is where the character and the real-world fandom fused into one thing in a way that is truly unusual in television history. From the very first episode, Gravity Falls hid codes in itself. At the end of every episode's credits, there was a cryptogram, a string of apparently meaningless symbols or letters, and fans quickly discovered that these were real ciphers, solvable ones, using classic cryptographic techniques. The early episodes used simple substitution ciphers, a Caesar shift where each letter is moved a fixed number of places, and an A1Z26 cipher where each letter is simply replaced by its number in the alphabet. As the series went on, the ciphers got harder, moving to the @bash cipher where the alphabet is reversed, and eventually to the visionare cipher, a genuinely sophisticated method that requires a keyword to open and that had, for centuries, a reputation for being uncrackable. There was binary hidden in the series, and symbols, and layered messages, an entire secondary text running underneath the episodes for anyone patient and clever enough to decode it. And this is why Dipper is, in a sense, Gravity Falls' avatar for its own audience, because decoding is his entire method. He is the character who looks at a meaningless string of symbols and assumes it is a message. He is the one who reads the footnotes, who cross-references the journal, who treats the world as a cryptogram that will yield to patience. When Gravity Falls fans sat with pen and paper working out the visionaire key to decode a hidden message in the credits, they were doing, in the real world, precisely what Dipper does inside the story, and the series knew it and rewarded it because the decoded messages often contained real lore, hints about the plot, jokes, foreshadowing, secrets the episodes did not state out loud. The show trusted that some fraction of its audience would be Dippers, would do the work, and it wrote a whole hidden layer for them. That is an extraordinary act of respect for an audience, and it is why the fandom around this show became so intense and so devoted, because the series treated paying close attention not as optional but as a form of participation, a way of being inside the story rather than just watching it. That fusion of Gravity Falls and its audience reached its strangest and most wonderful expression in the summer of 2016, a few months after the finale, when Alex Hirsch launched something called the Cipher Hunt, a real-world scavenger hunt that turned the whole fandom into Dipper for a few weeks. Hirsch began releasing cryptic clues online, images and codes and puzzles that pointed to physical locations in the real world. And hidden at the end of the trail was an actual physical statue of Bill Cipher, a golden triangle placed somewhere out in the world, and the challenge to the fans was to solve the clues, decode the ciphers, and find it. And they did. Fans across multiple countries organized themselves, pooled their knowledge, traveled to locations, followed the trail of puzzles across the globe, and eventually tracked the statue down to a forest in Oregon, the same state where the fictional Gravity Falls is set. It was a genuine collective act of decoding, thousands of people doing, together in the physical world, the exact thing Dipper does alone with his journal, and it is one of the purest examples I know of a show's central character becoming a template for how its fans engage with it. To be a Gravity Falls fan was to be a codebreaker, and the codebreaker they were all imitating, whether they thought of it that way or not, was a nervous 12-year-old with a pine tree on his hat. I dwell on this because I think it is the single most underappreciated thing about Dipper as a character. He is usually discussed in terms of his emotional arc, the growing up, the sister, the crush, and all of that is real and central. But there is another sense in which Dipper is a statement about a whole way of moving through the world. The conviction that things mean something, that mysteries are solvable, that patience and attention are a kind of heroism available to anyone. No strength or magic required. In a genre full of chosen ones and superpowers, Dipper's power is that he pays attention and writes things down. And the series elevates that, the ordinary human act of careful curiosity, into the thing that saves the day again and again. That is a really lovely message to build a children's hero around. That you do not need to be extraordinary to matter, you need to be observant and brave and unwilling to accept the surface of things, and every kid who watched this show and then went and taught themselves the Caesar cipher to crack the credits absorbed that message as directly as anyone could by living it. Let me talk about how this character actually got made, because the real-world story behind Dipper is honestly part of what makes him work. Gravity Falls was created by Alex Hirsch, who developed the series and pitched it to Disney, and it premiered in June of 2012 and ran until early 2016. Hirsch did not just create the show, he was central to its voice in a very literal way, because he voiced several of its characters himself, most famously Grunkle Stan, and in his most memorable performance, Bill Cipher, giving the demon that unforgettable manic register. But Dipper himself was voiced by Jason Ritter, and the pairing of Ritter's slightly anxious, eager, cracking delivery with the character's design created something specific and alive. A kid who always sounds like he is a half step behind the situation and running to catch up, which is exactly right for a boy perpetually in over his head. The autobiographical thread is the part I keep returning to because it explains the emotional precision of the twins. Hirsch has been open about the fact that Dipper and Mabel are based loosely on himself and his own twin sister Ariel, and that Gravity Falls grew in part out of memories of the summers of their own childhood. That is why the relationship between the twins does not feel like a writer's room construction. It has the texture of lived experience, the specific way real siblings fight and forgive and communicate in shorthand, the particular ache of a closeness that you know, even as a child, cannot last in exactly its current form forever. When people say Gravity Falls feels more emotionally true than a show about monster hunting kids has any right to feel, this is a large part of why. The central relationship is drawn from life, and Dipper is in some real sense a portrait of the creator as a nervous, over-prepared, monster-obsessed boy, which means the character's insecurities are not invented for plot convenience, they are remembered. And here's a decision about the series' real-world history that reflects directly back onto Dipper's story, which is that Gravity Falls ended not because it was canceled or ran out of audience, but because Alex Hirsch chose to end it. The series was popular, it was acclaimed, Disney would surely have taken more of it, and Hirsch decided that the story he wanted to tell was a finite one, a single summer with a beginning and an end, and that dragging it out past its natural conclusion would betray the thing it was about. He planned it as 2 seasons, and he ended it as 2 seasons, and I think that decision is inseparable from what Dipper's arc means, because Gravity Falls is about the fact that summers end, that childhood is finite, that the preciousness of a thing is bound up with its not lasting forever. A version of Gravity Falls that ran for 8 seasons, that kept Dipper 12 turning 13 indefinitely, that never let the summer end, would have been a betrayal of its own thesis, would have been, in a sense, Mabel's bubble, the endless summer that is secretly a prison. Hirsch refused to build that bubble. He let the summer end, on purpose, because a story about growing up has to be willing to grow up itself, has to be willing to stop. And that is why the ending lands the way it does, because the show practiced what it preached and let go. Having walked the whole of Dipper's story from the first page to the last bus, I want to spend the rest of our time tonight going back through him more slowly, not the events, but the person, because a character this carefully built rewards being looked at from several angles, and there are things about Dipper Pines that only come clear when you stop following the plot and start following the shape of who he is. And the first and deepest of those things is the twin bond, because you cannot understand Dipper without understanding that he is one half of a matched pair, and that the pair is not an accident of the plot, but the philosophical engine of the entire show. Dipper and Mabel are not just a brother and sister who love each other. They are two answers to the same question, and the question is what you are supposed to do about the fact that childhood ends. Dipper's answer is to run toward the ending, to embrace growing up, to want to be older, more capable, more serious, to meet the future head-on and try to be ready for it. Mabel's answer is the opposite, to hold on with everything she has, to make every summer last, to refuse the ending, to keep the magic and the silliness and the closeness exactly as they are. And the series is scrupulously fair to both of them, which is what makes it wise rather than preachy, because it never tells you that Dipper is right and Mabel is wrong, or the reverse. It shows you that both instincts taken alone are dangerous. Dipper's hunger to grow up, unchecked, leads him toward Ford, toward the lonely genius, toward a future where the work matters more than the people. Mabel's refusal to grow up, unchecked, leads her into Bill's bubble, into a fantasy prison of endless summer that would have trapped her forever. Each twin is the cure for the other's poison. Dipper needs Mabel's warmth and her insistence on joy to keep his intelligence from curdling into cold ambition. Mabel needs Dipper's clear sight and his willingness to face hard truths to keep her optimism from becoming denial. That is why they have to grow up together or not at all, and it is why the series' central fear is not any monster but the fear of the twins growing apart. Because if they grow apart, each one loses the thing that keeps them whole. The great uncles are the proof. Stanford and Stanley were the same kind of matched pair, the brilliant one and the warm one, and they were torn apart young, and look what happened. The genius became a bitter recluse who let a demon into his mind because he was too proud and too lonely to have anyone check him. The warm one became a con man who spent 30 years in guilt. Separated, each brother's strength became a weakness because the thing that balanced it was gone. Dipper and Mabel are being shown in the form of their own great uncles exactly what they stand to become if they let the growing up and growing apart happen the way it happened to Stan and Ford. And the entire climax of the series, Dipper choosing his sister over the apprenticeship, is the twins refusing to repeat that history, reaching across the rift their great uncles fell into, and choosing to face the future as a pair. What I find deeply moving about this, and what I think is the most sophisticated thing the series does, is that it does not pretend the twins can stay the same. It is not a story about two kids who agree to never grow up, which would be Mabel's fantasy, the bubble. It is a story about two kids who agree to grow up without abandoning each other, which is much harder and much truer. Dipper does not stop wanting to grow up. He does not renounce the future. He turns down the apprenticeship, yes, but he goes home to become a teenager, to change, to move forward, and Mabel comes with him, and the promise between them is not that nothing will change, it is that they will change together, that whatever they become, they will remain a pair. That is a real answer to the fear of growing up, maybe the only real one, which is not to refuse it and not to face it alone, but to face it beside the person who balances you. Gravity Falls could have taken the easy way and made the moral be that you should stay young forever, or the cold way and made it be that you have to leave childish things behind. Instead, it says something harder and kinder, that you have to grow up and you should not have to do it alone. And if you are very lucky, you have someone who will do it with you. There is a specific texture to how the twins communicate that I think deserves its own attention because it is so accurately observed. They finish each other's thoughts, they have private jokes that make no sense to anyone else, they annoy each other with a fluency that only comes from a lifetime of proximity, and crucially, they fight. They really fight over rooms and attention and whose turn it is and who is right, and none of it threatens the bond because the bond is the ground the fighting happens on, not a thing the fighting endangers. That is what real sibling love looks like, and it is very hard to write, because the temptation is always to make the loving siblings either saccharine, always kind, or to make the conflict feel like it might actually break them. Gravity Falls threads it perfectly. Dipper and Mabel can be sincerely furious with each other, and you never once doubt that each would die for the other, and that combination, the ordinary irritation sitting on top of the bottomless loyalty, is exactly how it feels to have a sibling you love. This is where the autobiographical origin shows most clearly. You do not write a relationship this precise from theory. You write it from having lived it. And it is worth saying that Dipper is, in the specific accounting of the twins, often the more anxious and the more contained one, the one who holds things in, who worries in silence, who does not always tell Mabel what he is feeling, and that this is itself a source of the near disasters in the show. The apprenticeship crisis happens in part because Dipper does not talk to Mabel about the offer, does not include her in the biggest decision of his summer, and she finds out by overhearing, which is the worst possible way. If Dipper had simply told his sister what Ford offered and talked it through with her, the whole spiral that leads to Weirdmageddon might never have started. That is not to blame him, he is a 12-year-old handed an impossible choice. But it is to notice that his particular flaw, the tendency to retreat into his own head, to carry things alone, is the same flaw that defines Ford, and that the series is discreetly warning him about it through the whole back half of the series. The cure for that flaw is, again, Mabel is opening up, is not carrying things alone, and the reconciliation in the bubble is Dipper finally doing the thing he should have done at the start, telling his sister the truth and letting her in. The lesson is not just choose the people over the work, it is let the people in, do not carry it alone. Do not become the man with a metal plate in his skull who has sealed himself off so completely that no one, not even the people who love him, can reach inside. The next thing about Dipper that I want to look at closely is his fear, because he is, when you actually tally it up, one of the most frightened protagonists ever built for a children's adventure show, and the series makes that fear central rather than incidental. And I think that is one of the quietly radical things about him. Most adventure heroes are brave in the sense that they do not feel much fear, or they feel it, and it is a brief obstacle they overcome once and then leave behind. Dipper's afraid almost all the time. He is afraid of monsters, of the dark, of embarrassment, of Wendy not liking him, of being seen as a kid, of the government, of the future, of losing his sister, of not being enough. His default state is a kind of low, humming anxiety, a mind that races ahead to every bad outcome, and Gravity Falls does not treat this as a defect to be cured. It treats it as simply who he is, and it builds his heroism on top of it rather than in place of it. Because here's the thing about Dipper's bravery, and it is the definition of courage I most believe in. He is not brave because he is unafraid. He is brave because he is afraid and does the thing anyway. Every time he pulls a lever he does not understand, every time he walks into the woods at night, every time he confronts something enormously more powerful than himself, he is doing it scared, with his heart pounding and his mind screaming at him to run. And he does it because he has decided that the fear is not the thing that gets to make his decisions. That is a much more useful model of courage for a child watching than the fearless hero model, because no real child is fearless. And a show that tells kids that heroes do not feel fear is telling them implicitly that their own fear disqualifies them from being brave. Gravity Falls tells them the opposite. It shows them a hero who is scared constantly and who matters anyway, whose fear is not a weakness but simply the weather he operates in. And I think a lot of anxious kids saw themselves in Dipper in a way they had never seen themselves in a protagonist before. Saw that you could be the worried one, the one whose stomach hurts, the one who overthinks everything, and still be the hero of the story. And his anxiety is drawn with real specificity, not just generic fearfulness. It is the anxiety of a smart kid, which is a particular flavor because his intelligence is part of what feeds it. He can see all the ways things might go wrong precisely because he is clever enough to imagine them, and his mind, which is his great strength, is also the thing that generates most of his suffering, running scenarios, cataloging threats, unable to switch off. That is a very real and very specific portrait of what it is like to be an intelligent, anxious person. The double-edged quality of a mind that never stops, that protects you and torments you with the same faculty. Dipper's cleverness is not a superpower he wields cleanly. It comes bundled with a cost, the inability to be at ease, the constant low awareness of everything that could go wrong, and the series is honest enough to show both sides of it, to let his intelligence save the day and also let it be the thing that keeps him up at night. That honesty is rare, and it is part of why the character feels so real. There is a moment I keep coming back to when I think about Dipper and fear, which is the way the series handles his confidence over the 2 seasons because it does not follow the expected arc. You might expect a coming-of-age story to move its hero from anxious to confident, to have him arrive frightened and leave self-assured, the fear cured, the growth complete. Gravity Falls does not do that, and I admire it for not doing that. Dipper at the end of the series is still anxious, still overthinks, still has the racing mind. What changes is not that the fear goes away, but that his relationship to it matures. He learns to act inside the fear more smoothly, to trust himself a little more, to not need external validation quite so desperately, but the fundamental anxious temperament is still there, because that is who he is, and the show understands that you do not grow up by becoming a different person. You grow up by becoming a more settled version of the same person. The anxious kid becomes an anxious teenager who has learned some things, not a confident teenager who used to be anxious. And that is truer to how people actually change, which is slowly, partially, without ever fully leaving behind the temperament they were born with. I said earlier that his salvation in that early Haunted Store episode was accepting, for a moment, that he was a child, and I want to connect that back to the fear, because there is a through line here about the relationship between his anxiety and his desperation to grow up. A lot of Dipper's fear is fear of being seen as young, as small, as not enough, and a lot of his reaching for maturity is an attempt to escape that fear, to armor himself in age and competence so that no one can dismiss him. And Gravity Falls keeps gently showing him that the armor does not work, that pretending to be older does not make the fear go away, that the way through is not to escape being a scared kid, but to accept it, to let himself be exactly as young and frightened as he is, and find that he is loved and valuable anyway. That is the deep therapy running under all the monster plots, the repeated lesson that you do not have to be older or braver or cooler than you are to deserve your place, that the anxious kid is already enough. And it is a lesson the series is patient enough to teach many times, in many costumes, because it is the kind of lesson that has to be learned many times, that most of us are still learning. I think this is the part of Dipper that has aged the best, and that means the world to the people who grew up on him, because the culture around children has gotten, if anything, more anxious in the years since Gravity Falls ended, and a hero who is openly, unashamedly anxious and heroic anyway is a more valuable thing now than ever. Dipper does not model fearlessness, which is a lie no one can live up to. He models something achievable, which is being afraid and acting well anyway, being anxious and kind anyway, being scared and showing up anyway. That is a template a real person can actually use. And I suspect that is a large part of why, of all the things people love about this show, the love for Dipper specifically tends to be so personal, so identificatory, because he is not a fantasy of who you wish you were, he is a portrait of who you already are. The worried, overthinking, trying hard kid, told that that kid is enough to be the hero of the story. There is a thread running through Dipper's whole story that I touched on with the Manitors, but that deserves to be pulled all the way out because the series returns to it again and again, and that is the question of masculinity, of what it means to be a man, which for a boy of 12 is really the question of what kind of person he is going to become. Dipper is preoccupied with this from very early on, and the show is unusually thoughtful about it, because it takes the anxiety seriously without ever endorsing the toxic answers the world keeps offering the boy. Look at the pattern across the series. Dipper repeatedly encounters models of manhood, and almost every one of them is a trap. The Manitors offer him manhood as brutality, as the willingness to hurt and dominate and feel nothing, and he rejects it. Robbie, the older teenage boy, offers a model of manhood as cool detachment, as being too aloof to care, as treating a girl like a possession, and Dipper is tempted by the coolness and repelled by the cruelty. Even the bad dating advice he absorbs later, the smooth operator patter he tries out with girls, is a model of manhood as manipulation, as technique, as performance, and the series knocks it down. Over and over, the world hands Dipper a version of what a man is supposed to be. And over, it turns out to be hollow or poisonous, and he has to find his own way to a definition that is neither the brutal one, nor the aloof one, nor the manipulative one. And the definition he arrives at, gradually, without Gravity Falls ever preaching it in a single speech, is that manhood, real manhood, the kind worth having, is about integrity and gentleness and courage, about doing what is right when it costs you, about protecting people without dominating them, about being honest instead of performing. The moment with the Manitors where he refuses to kill a harmless creature and they call him weak and he turns out to be the strongest one in the room precisely because he had the strength to refuse, is the thesis, and the whole rest of the series is variations on it. Dipper becomes more of a man not by getting tougher or cooler or smoother, but by getting kinder, braver, more honest, more himself. The arc bends toward the idea that the measure of a man is not how much he can dominate, but how well he can love and protect and stay true. And in a culture that keeps selling boys the opposite, that is a plainly valuable thing for a show to say. And it says it without ever once feeling like a lecture, because it says it through story, through the boy trying the bad versions and finding them empty. What makes this land rather than feel like a message is that Dipper's anxiety about his masculinity is treated with sympathy, not mockery. The series never makes him ridiculous for worrying about whether he is manly enough. It understands that this is a real and painful thing that real boys feel. The fear of being soft, of being weak, of not measuring up to some standard of maleness they have absorbed from everywhere. And instead of laughing at that fear or dismissing it, Gravity Falls sits with the boy in it, and gently, patiently, shows him a better way to think about the whole question. It says, in effect, that the standard he is measuring himself against is a lie, that the loud, aggressive version of manhood is a cartoon, and that he is already, in his kindness and his courage and his loyalty, more of a man than the Manitors will ever be. That is a message aimed with real precision at exactly the boys who most need to hear it. The anxious ones, the sensitive ones, the ones who suspect they are not manly enough by the world's dumb standards, and it tells them that the world's standards are wrong and that they are fine as they are. And I want to connect this to Ford because Ford is the adult version of a certain kind of masculine failure, and Dipper's arc is in part about not becoming him. Ford's flaw is not aggression, he is not a Manitor, he is something subtler and more relevant to a boy like Dipper, which is the masculinity of the lone genius, the man who defines himself by his intellect and his self-sufficiency, and his refusal to need anyone, who treats connection as a weakness and independence as the highest value, and who ends up, because of that, catastrophically alone and catastrophically vulnerable, because a man who will not let anyone close is a man no one can warn, no one can check, no one can save. Ford's isolation is what let Bill in. If Ford had had someone close to him, someone he trusted, someone he talked to the way Dipper eventually learns to talk to Mabel, that person might have said, "This muse of yours sounds too good to be true, be careful." But Ford had sealed himself off in the name of a certain proud, self-sufficient version of manhood, and there was no one to say it, and a demon walked into the gap. That is the masculine trap the show is most worried about for Dipper, not the brutality of the Manitors, which he rejects easily, but the seductive isolation of the genius, which he is actually drawn to, because it flatters exactly his sense of himself as the clever one, the special one, the one who does not need the ordinary things other people need. So when Dipper turns down the apprenticeship and chooses Mabel, he is doing more than choosing his sister over a career. He is rejecting a whole model of what a man is, the self-sufficient genius who needs no one, and choosing instead a model of manhood that is defined by connection, by needing and being needed, by not going it alone. He is choosing to be a man who lets people in over a man who seals himself off. And the series frames that correctly as strength rather than weakness, as the harder and better choice. The lonely genius looks like the strong one, the impressive one, the one who does not need anybody. But the series has shown you, through Ford, that this is a kind of weakness dressed up as strength, that the man who needs no one is the man no one can protect. Dipper chooses to be protectable, to be reachable, to be part of a pair, and that is Gravity Falls' final word on what it means for him to become a man, that a man is not someone who stands alone, but someone who chooses, freely, to stand with the people he loves. I want to go back to the Wendy Crush because I think it is worth a second, deeper look, not for the events, which we have covered, but for what Gravity Falls is doing with it structurally, because on reflection, it is one of the bravest choices in the whole series, and one that a lesser show would never have made. Consider the pressure the writers were under. The Dipper and Wendy relationship was hugely popular. A significant part of the audience desperately wanted them to end up together, was invested in it, was rooting for the underdog kid to somehow, someday win the cool older girl. That is a powerful thing for a show to have, an audience that wants a particular outcome, and the easy, crowd-pleasing move is to give it to them, to keep the will they won't they alive, to imply that maybe, when they are both older, it could happen, to dangle the possibility forever because the possibility is what the fans are addicted to. Gravity Falls refused. It looked at the fact that a 12-year-old cannot and should not end up with a 15-year-old, that the age gap is real and the crush is one-sided, and it decided to tell the truth about that, even though the truth was not what a large part of the audience wanted to hear. And it did not just refuse the romance. It did something much harder and much more valuable, which is that it modeled the healthy version of the whole situation. It showed a boy having a huge crush, being brave enough to confess it, being told no clearly and kindly, and then crucially, not being destroyed by the no, not turning bitter, not deciding the girl owed him something, not sulking his way through the rest of the series, but accepting the answer with grace and keeping the friendship. That last part is the part that matters, because the toxic script that a lot of media hands boys about rejection is that a no is a wound, an injustice, a thing to resent, and that the girl who says it has done something to you. Gravity Falls hands Dipper and every kid watching the opposite script, which is that a no is not the end of the world, that the person who says it can still be your friend, that rejection is survivable, and that how you handle it is a measure of your character. Wendy's side of it is written with just as much care, and I think she is underappreciated in discussions of this arc because she does something unmistakably difficult and does it well. She has known about Dipper's crush the whole time. She could have made it weird, could have pulled away, could have been cruel or embarrassed him, or pretended not to notice in a way that curdled the friendship. Instead, she treats it with kindness, protects his dignity, never mocks him, and when the moment comes, she is honest without being harsh, clear without being cruel, letting him down in a way that leaves him his self-respect and leaves the friendship intact. That is a real skill and emotional maturity that the show subtly credits her with, and it makes her more than just the object of a crush. She is a person handling another person's feelings with care, which is its own kind of quiet heroism. And the friendship that survives is a credit to both of them, to his grace in accepting the no and her grace in delivering it. And the deeper thing, the thing I most respect, is that the series understood that the crush was never really the point. The crush was a vehicle for teaching Dipper something about himself, about wanting, about the difference between the fantasy of a person and the reality of a friendship, about the fact that you cannot scheme or perform your way into being loved, and that the honest connection underneath the desperate longing is worth more than the longing ever was. Dipper spends the first season trying to engineer Wendy's affection, cloning himself, using time travel, meddling in her relationships, and none of it works, and it never could have worked because that is not how love happens. And when he finally lets go of the scheming, when he simply tells the truth and accepts the answer, he gets something better than the fantasy. He gets a real friend, someone who truly likes and respects him, and Gravity Falls is telling him, and us, that this was always the better prize, that the honest human connection was worth more than the romantic conquest he thought he wanted. When Wendy gives him her hat at the end, that is the payoff, an older friend saying, without saying it, "I see you, I respect you, you matter to me," which is a form of love, just not the form he was chasing, and a truer one. There is a version of this arc in 100 other shows that goes badly, that either strings the audience along with false hope, or that treats the boy's crush as pathetic comedy, or that lets him win the girl in a way that would be really inappropriate given their ages. And Gravity Falls avoided every one of those failure modes and did the honest, healthy, emotionally intelligent thing instead, and I do not think it gets enough credit for that. It is easy to make a crush funny, it is hard to make a crush true, to honor how much it hurts, and how much it matters to the kid feeling it, while also being clear-eyed about the fact that it is not going to happen and that that is okay. Dipper's love for Wendy is treated as real and significant and worthy of respect, and it is also gently and firmly not indulged. And the combination is the mark of a show that respects both its characters and its audience enough to tell them the truth. And the truth, the one Dipper learns, is one of the more useful things a young person can learn, which is that you will want people who do not want you back in the same way, and that this is survivable, and that the wanting does not have to poison the friendship, and that a graceful no, given and received well, can be the beginning of something good rather than the end of something. Let me turn now to the relationship that most defines Dipper as a hero, which is his relationship with Bill Cipher, because the two of them are, in a deep sense, designed as opposites, and the shape of their conflict tells you what the series believes intelligence is for. Dipper is the series' embodiment of curiosity, of the desire to know, of the conviction that understanding the world makes you safer and better. Bill is the show's embodiment of what that same desire becomes when it curdles, when knowledge is pursued without love, when cleverness is unmoored from any care for other people. Bill is, in a way, the smartest character in the series, a being of nearly infinite knowledge and perception, and he is also the emptiest and loneliest, a creature of pure nihilism, and that is not a coincidence. Gravity Falls is making an argument through the contrast between the frightened boy and the omniscient demon about what intelligence is worth if it is not attached to anything. Bill's whole method is to exploit the desire to know. He does not attack people's bodies first, he attacks their curiosity, their ambition, their hunger to understand. He got to Ford by offering him knowledge, by posing as a muse who would help him understand the deepest secrets of the universe, and Ford, hungry to know, took the bait. He got to Dipper in sock opera the same way, by offering him the answer to the mystery he most wanted solved, the locked laptop, the secret of the author. Bill understands that the desire to know is the deepest hunger of exactly the kind of person Dipper is, and he uses it as the hook every single time. And this is what makes him the perfect antagonist for Dipper specifically, because he is not a threat Dipper can outthink, he is a threat that targets the very thing Dipper is best at, that turns Dipper's greatest strength, his curiosity, into the vulnerability through which he can be destroyed. A villain who threatened Dipper with strength would be no real threat, because Dipper never relied on strength. A villain who threatens Dipper through his curiosity is a villain aimed directly at his heart. And the resolution of that conflict is the whole moral of the series in miniature. Dipper does not defeat Bill by being smarter than him. Because he is not smarter than him, no one is. Bill is defeated by love, by the con-stan, and Ford run powered by a willingness to sacrifice, by the bonds between people that Bill, for all his knowledge, never understood and could not account for. Bill's fatal blind spot, the thing his infinite intelligence could never see, is that people will give up everything they are for each other, that a man will let his own mind be erased to save his family, that the twins will choose each other over any prize the demon can dangle. Bill's nihilism, his certainty that nothing matters, that everything is meaningless, that reality is a joke, is precisely the thing that blinds him. Because in a universe where nothing matters, self-sacrificing love makes no sense, is unpredictable, is a variable he cannot model. He is defeated by the one force his philosophy denies exists. And Dipper, the curious boy, learns the lesson that his mentor Ford learned too late, that knowledge alone is not enough, that the smartest person in the room is not safe if they are alone, that the thing that actually beats the demon is not a cleverer plan but a deeper love. I think Bill's origin, the Euclidean story from the later book, sharpens all of this in retrospect, because it reveals that Bill's nihilism is a defense, a way of not feeling the guilt of having destroyed his own world. He decided nothing matters because he could not bear to have destroyed something that did matter, and that makes him a warning, a portrait of what happens to a mind that severs itself from love and meaning, that decides caring is a weakness and connection is a joke. Bill is what Dipper's intelligence could become if it ever cut itself off from his heart. A brilliant, lonely, self-justifying thing that destroys everything it touches and tells itself none of it matters. And Gravity Falls, by putting the frightened, loving boy against the brilliant, loveless demon and letting love win, is making about as clear a statement as a story can make about which of those two things it believes is more powerful, not the intelligence, the love, The intelligence is a tool, and a tool in the hands of someone who has stopped caring is the deadliest thing in the universe. And a tool in the hands of someone who loves is what saves the world. There is a smaller thing in the Dipper and Bill dynamic that I find softly satisfying, which is that Dipper is one of the few characters who consistently distrusts Bill from the start. Ford was fooled for years. Mabel was fooled at the critical moment. But Dipper, after his one early mistake in sock opera, becomes deeply, permanently wary of the demon. And that wariness is a form of hard-won wisdom, the specific wisdom of someone who was burned once and learned from it. When Ford warns Dipper never to trust Bill, Dipper does not need much convincing because he already knows in his body what it feels like to be used by that thing. His single worst mistake, signing his body over to Bill, becomes the source of his greatest protection against Bill. The immunity that comes from having already been fooled once and refusing to be fooled again. That is a very human kind of growth, the way our worst mistakes, if we survive them and learn, become the exact places where we are strongest afterward. The scar tissue that is tougher than the skin that was never cut. Dipper's early failure with Bill is not just a low point, it is what makes him, by the end, one of the few people the demon cannot manipulate. And there is a real wisdom in the show, letting his growth come out of his failure rather than his success. For all the attention that goes to Dipper and Ford, the mentor of the mind, I think the more quietly important adult relationship in Dipper's life is the one with Grunkle Stan. And it is the one that gets overlooked precisely because it is not built on the things Dipper values most. Ford and Dipper bond over intelligence, over shared nerdiness, over the mysteries. Stan and Dipper have almost none of that in common. Stan is not a reader. Stan is not a puzzle solver. Stan is a con man, a cheapskate, a gruff old fraud who spends the first stretch of the series seeming to view the twins as free labor and mild nuisances. And Dipper, early on, does not especially respect him, sees him as an obstacle, an embarrassment, a man to be managed and sometimes deceived. The relationship starts cold, and it warms so gradually that you almost do not notice it happening, until you look up near the end and realize that Stan has become among the more important people in Dipper's life, and that the con man taught the boy things the genius never could. Because here is what Stan has that Ford does not, and what Dipper needs at least as much as he needs Ford's knowledge. Stan has heart, has loyalty, has an absolutely unbreakable devotion to family that has survived everything. 30 years of guilt and estrangement and sacrifice. Stan spent 3 decades of his life secretly working to save a brother who had every reason to think he had given up on him, running a con and keeping a terrible secret, and never once quitting out of pure, stubborn love. That is a different kind of intelligence than Ford's, an intelligence of the heart, a wisdom about people and loyalty and what actually matters. And Dipper, over the course of the summer, absorbs it, learns from Stan the thing that Ford, for all his genius, never learned, which is that the people are the point, that no achievement and no discovery is worth being alone. Ford is the cautionary tale. Stan is improbably the role model, the man who lost everything and kept faith with his family anyway. And it is Stan's example, as much as anything, that gives Dipper the strength to make the choice Ford could not, to choose the sister over the work. There is a lovely inversion in this because on the surface, Ford is the impressive one, the one Dipper idolizes, the one who offers him the glamorous future. And Stan is the disappointment, the fraud, the small-time crook. But the series slowly reveals that the values are backward, that the con man has the thing that matters and the genius is missing it, and that the future Ford offers, the apprenticeship, the life of the lone investigator, is a trap that would make Dipper into a second Ford, brilliant and alone, while the thing Stan embodies, the fierce loyalty to family above all, is the thing that would actually save him. Dipper spends the summer thinking Ford is the one he wants to become, and the series is gently telling him the whole time that Stan is the better model, that the man he underestimated has the wisdom the man he worshipped lacks. And by the end, when Stan makes the ultimate sacrifice, gives up his entire mind and self to save the family, Dipper understands, has to understand, that the greatest heroism in his whole summer came not from the genius with the 6 fingers, but from the fraud with the fez, the con man, whose one true thing, underneath all the lies, was that he would give up anything for the people he loved. I think about the arc of Dipper's respect for Stan a lot because it is such an accurate portrait of how children come to understand the adults in their lives. You start out taking your family at surface value, seeing the flaws, the embarrassments, the ways they fall short of the impressive people you imagine you want to be surrounded by. And then, slowly, if you are paying attention, you start to see underneath, to understand that the unglamorous relative who is always there is worth more than the glamorous one who is not, that showing up and staying and sacrificing gently is a deeper kind of love than any amount of brilliance. Dipper's journey with Stan is that journey, from seeing a fraud to seeing a hero, from underestimating the old man to understanding that the old man is the truest person in the whole story. And it happens without a single big speech, just through accumulated time, through Stan being there again and again in ways that slowly become impossible to dismiss. And Stan, for his part, is changed by the twins too, softened by them, given a reason to be better than the small, bitter con man he had let himself become, and there is a mutuality to it that I find moving. Dipper needs Stan's heart. Stan needs Dipper's and Mabel's presence to remind him that he is capable of love, that the loyalty he has kept locked up in service of his lost brother can also flow outward to these two kids who arrived on his doorstep and cracked him open. By the end, they have made each other better, the anxious, brilliant boy and the gruff, loving fraud, each supplying something the other lacked. And when the twins finally leave, the goodbye between Dipper and Stan carries all of that. The whole unlikely history of a relationship that started with mutual wariness and ended with a kind of love that neither of them would have predicted at the start of the summer. It is one of the least flashy relationships in Gravity Falls and one of the more important, and if you want to understand who Dipper becomes, you have to understand that he was shaped as much by the con man's heart as by the genius's mind, and that in the end he chose the heart. Around Dipper, there is a wider circle of relationships that shape him in smaller but real ways, and I want to give a couple of them their due because a character is partly made by everyone around him, and Dipper's supporting cast is one of the warmest and best drawn in animation. Suze, the Mystery Shack's handyman, is the gentlest presence in Dipper's summer, a grown man with the openness and enthusiasm of a child, endlessly loyal, endlessly kind, and he functions for Dipper as a kind of older brother without any of the competition or complication that an actual older sibling might bring. Suze never makes Dipper feel small, never mocks his fears, is simply there, a steady, loving, uncomplicated friend. And there is something important in that. For an anxious kid, the presence of one relationship that asks nothing, competes over nothing, and offers only warmth. When Suze becomes the owner of the Mystery Shack at the very end, inheriting it from Stan, it feels earned because Suze has been all along the heart of the place in a quiet way, the one who loved the shack and the family without any of the con man's baggage, and it is fitting that the home passes to the person who loved it most simply. Then there's Gideon, who I circle back to because he is the sharpest mirror among Dipper's antagonists, the dark mirror I mentioned at his introduction. And the contrast between them only sharpens as the series goes on. Both boys are small, clever, underestimated, and in love, or convinced they are, with someone. But everything about how they handle those shared conditions is opposite. Dipper's insecurity makes him work harder, protect people, examine himself, pull back from cruelty when he feels himself drifting toward it. Gideon's insecurity makes him grasping, entitled, willing to hurt anyone who stands between him and what he wants, convinced that his desires are the same as his rights. And the thing about Gideon's obsession with Mabel that makes him so unsettling is that it is a distortion of love into ownership, a boy who thinks that wanting someone means being owed them, that a girl who does not return his feelings is committing a wrong against him. He is the toxic version of exactly the situation Dipper is in with Wendy, and the series is drawing the contrast on purpose. Dipper wants someone who does not want him back, and he learns to accept it, to keep the friendship, to let her go. Gideon wants someone who does not want him back, and he tries to imprison her, to force it, to take by manipulation and threat what was not freely given. They are the two roads out of the same crossroads, and the show uses Gideon to show you, in the negative, the road Dipper chose not to take. What redeems Gideon slightly, and what makes him more than a simple villain, is that Gravity Falls eventually gives him a little grace, a little understanding, reveals the pressures that made him, the stage parent father exploiting his son's talent, the loneliness under the psychic act, and by the very end, Gideon has begun, tentatively, to become a better version of himself, even taking his place on the zodiac wheel among the people fighting to save the town. It is a small redemption, and the series does not oversell it, but it matters, because it says that the road Gideon took is not a life sentence, that even the boy who chose entitlement and cruelty can choose differently, can grow, can end up standing with the people he once schemed against. And Dipper, who spent the whole first season as Gideon's rival, ends up on that wheel beside him. Two clever small boys who took opposite roads out of the same insecurity and ended up, in the crisis, on the same side, which is its own quiet statement about the possibility of change. I want to say something too about Dipper's method, about the journal and the note-taking and the way he moves through the world, because it is easy to treat it as just a plot device, the field guide that conveniently tells him what each monster is, but I think it is actually central to who he is and to what the series is celebrating in him. Dipper is, at his core, a documentarian. He writes things down, he observes, he records, he cross-references, he builds knowledge patiently over time. When he finds the journal, what thrills him is not just that it has answers, but that it represents a whole way of being, someone who took the strange and the frightening and refused to just be scared of it, who instead studied it, cataloged it, tried to understand it, and Dipper recognizes that impulse in himself, and it gives him a model for how to be. The journal is not just a book of monsters, it is a demonstration that the right answer to a terrifying, incomprehensible world is not to look away, but to look harder, to write it down, to try to understand, and Dipper adopts that as his entire posture toward existence. And there is something almost noble in that when you sit with it, because the world genuinely is frightening and incomprehensible, for children most of all, and most people cope by not looking, by accepting the surface, by declining to ask the questions that might have scary answers. Dipper cannot do that. He has to know. He would rather have a terrifying true answer than a comfortable false one. And that hunger, which is the source of most of his troubles, is also the source of everything admirable about him, because it is the same hunger that drives every scientist, every investigator, every person who has ever refused to accept the official story and gone looking for the real one. Gravity Falls honors that hunger even as it warns about its dangers, even as it shows, through Ford and through Bill, what the hunger to know becomes when it is severed from love. The lesson is not that curiosity is bad. The lesson is that curiosity needs to be attached to a heart, that the desire to understand the world is a gift, as long as it does not cost you the people in it. And Dipper is the character who, by the end, has learned to hold both, to keep the hunger to know and to keep it tethered to the people he loves, which is exactly the balance Ford lost and the balance that makes Dipper, in the end, the better version of the thing Ford was. For all that Dipper is the great solver of mysteries, it is worth sitting for a while with the ones he never solved, the questions the show deliberately left open, because Gravity Falls ran for only 2 seasons on screen and it ended still holding secrets it chose not to fully explain. And that restraint is part of its power. A show about a boy who has to know everything ends without letting him, or us, know everything, and I think that is the correct and honest choice, because the world does not run out of mysteries just because your summer ends, and a story that answered every question would be a story that had stopped believing in the thing it was about. The largest of the unanswered questions is the one the deepest lore only gestures at, the entity the series calls the axolotl. It surfaces in the series' most cryptic corners, in backwards messages and coded lines, a reference to a vast, ancient, godlike being tied somehow to the cosmic rules of the setting, to fate and reincarnation and the fundamental order of things. And Gravity Falls never explains it fully within the episodes themselves. The later material, the book written in Bill's voice, ties Bill's fate to the axolotl, suggests that this being is the one who ultimately contains him. But even there, the entity remains mostly a mystery, a hint of a much larger cosmology sitting behind the small summer story, a suggestion that the events of Gravity Falls are one corner of something enormous that the series never had time or inclination to map. Dipper never learns what the axolotl is. Neither do we, not really, and I think that is deliberate. A way of saying that even the hungriest mind, even the boy who reads to the end of every book, will die with questions unanswered, and that this is not a tragedy, but simply the condition of being a finite mind in an infinite world. There are smaller open threads too, the kind of thing the show scattered and never returned to. The full account of Ford's 30 years lost between dimensions is only ever glimpsed. A scattering of images and references to strange worlds and hard-won survival. An entire epic of wandering that the series gestures at and never tells. The true, complete source of Gravity Falls' weirdness, why this particular place became a magnet for the impossible, is hinted at, tied to the strange properties of the land itself, but never fully explained. And the exact completeness of Stan's recovery, whether the mind rebuilt from a scrapbook is truly whole, is left gently ambiguous, Gravity Falls declining to promise you that everything was restored perfectly, because a mind erased and brought back is not a thing you can fully guarantee, and the honest choice is to leave a little uncertainty there rather than tie it off too neatly. And of course, the largest open thread of all, for our purposes, is Dipper himself, his future, the adult he becomes, which, as we discuss the series and even the later books, leave mostly unwritten. There is something fitting about the fact that the boy who spent his whole story trying to solve every mystery is himself left as Gravity Falls' final unsolved mystery, an open question, a life still ahead of him that the story chooses not to spell out. We know the shape of him, the values he chose, the person he was becoming, but the specifics are left blank, and I have come to think that is a gift rather than a withholding. It means Dipper stays alive in a way that a fully documented character does not. It means everyone who loved him gets to carry their own sense of who he became, and that the boy on the bus at the end is still, in some sense, in motion, still becoming, never pinned down. The great mystery solver ends as a mystery, and the show, which was always about the value of not knowing, of the strangeness that makes life worth investigating, keeps faith with itself by refusing to resolve its own hero into a settled fact. I find I actually treasure the unanswered questions more than the answered ones, because the answered ones are the plot, and the unanswered ones are the atmosphere. The sense that Gravity Falls is a real place with more going on in it than any single story could contain. A world that extends past the edges of the frame. A lesser show would have felt compelled to explain everything, to leave no loose thread, to close every loop. And in doing so, it would have made the world smaller, would have turned an infinite strange place into a finite solved puzzle. Gravity Falls understood that mystery is not a problem to be eliminated, but a quality to be preserved. That a world worth returning to is a world you have not fully mapped, and it left enough unexplained that the town still feels, years later, like somewhere you could keep exploring. Like there are still journals out there in those woods waiting for the next curious kid to find them. That is a generous thing to leave an audience, an unfinished map. And it is the most Dipper-like gift Gravity Falls could give, because it is an invitation to keep looking, to keep wondering, to keep being the kind of person who stops to examine what everyone else walks past. And maybe that is the deepest thing the character leaves behind, not the answers he found, but the posture he modeled, the stance of curiosity, the refusal to accept the surface, the conviction that the world is stranger and more meaningful than it appears, and that paying attention is a form of love. Dipper never solves the axolotl. He never maps every anomaly. He goes home at the end of the summer with most of the world's strangeness still intact, still mysterious, still out there. And that is not a failure, it is the point, because the mysteries were never really the thing. The looking was the thing. The wonder was the thing. And that he keeps and gives to everyone watching long after the specific questions have faded. It is worth stepping back to think about where Dipper sits in the larger history of animated characters, because Gravity Falls arrived at a particular moment and helped change what people expected a cartoon on a children's channel could be. And Dipper is much of why. When the series premiered in 2012, the landscape of animation aimed at kids was in the middle of a quiet revolution. A handful of shows beginning to prove that you could make television for children that was honestly sophisticated, serialized, emotionally complex, willing to trust its young audience with real stakes and real sadness. Gravity Falls became one of the standard bearers of that movement, and Dipper became one of its emblematic protagonists, precisely because he was not a simplified, sanded-down kid hero, but a full, contradictory, believable person, anxious and brave and petty and loving all at once. Allowed to fail, allowed to be wrong, allowed to feel things too big for his small body. The thing that let Dipper age so well, that keeps people coming back to him a decade after the series ended, is that he was written without condescension. So much media for children assumes that kids need their protagonists simple, their lessons obvious, their emotions primary colored. Gravity Falls assumed the opposite, that kids are perfectly capable of understanding a hero who is complicated, who does the wrong thing for understandable reasons, who is driven by needs he does not fully understand. And it turned out to be right. The children who watched it did not need Dipper dumbed down, and the fact that he was not is exactly why so many of them grew up and still love him. Because a character written with that kind of respect does not expire when the audience matures. You can watch Dipper at 8 and see an exciting adventure hero, and watch him again at 18 and see a painfully accurate portrait of anxious adolescence, and again at 28 and see something about the whole bittersweet business of growing up. And the character supports all of those readings because he was built with enough truth in him to hold them. And there is his sheer iconic quality, the design that became a silhouette people recognize instantly. The cap with the pine tree, the vest, the general shape of him, became one of those images that escapes Gravity Falls, that made it and lives in the wider culture, on merchandise, in fan art, in the shorthand of a generation. Part of that is good character design, the way the show gave every major character a clean, memorable silhouette and a symbol. But part of it is that Dipper became a vessel that a huge number of people poured their own younger selves into. To love Dipper is very often to have seen yourself in him, and the identification is so common and so strong that the character has taken on a kind of representative quality, standing in for a whole experience. The experience of being the anxious, clever kid, the one who felt too much and worried too much and wanted so badly to be taken seriously. He is not just a character people like. He is a character people recognize as a version of themselves, and that is a rarer and more durable kind of attachment than mere liking. The fandom that grew around the series, and around Dipper specifically, was and remains extraordinarily devoted, and I have already talked about the cryptographic dimension of that devotion, the code breaking, the cipher hunt. But there is an emotional dimension too that is worth naming. People do not just analyze Dipper, they care about him, protectively, the way you care about a younger sibling or a younger version of yourself. There is a tenderness in how the fandom talks about him, a sense of wanting good things for him, of being glad he turned out okay, of being moved by his choices. That speaks to how completely Gravity Falls succeeded in making him feel like a real person rather than a product. You do not feel protective of a product, you feel protective of someone you have come to love. And the depth of feeling the fandom has for this fictional 12-year-old is a measure of how real the writing made him. And I think Dipper's endurance also has to do with the timing of his lesson, because the thing his story is about, the fear of growing up, the pain of change, the terror of growing apart from the people you love, is a thing that never stops being relevant, that every generation of kids faces fresh, and that adults keep facing in new forms for the rest of their lives. The specific anxieties Dipper carries about being taken seriously, about not being enough, about the future arriving too fast, are not childhood anxieties that you outgrow. They are human anxieties that just change costume as you age, and so the character keeps meaning something even to people decades past the age he was. You do not stop being afraid of change when you turn 14 or 20 or 40. You just get better sometimes at doing the brave thing scared, which is the exact thing Dipper models, and so the character remains useful, remains a small companion for the ongoing project of being a person who is afraid and acts well anyway. That is why he lasts, not because the series was clever, though it was, and not because the mysteries were fun, though they were, but because the boy at the center of it was true, and true things do not go out of date. I have spent a lot of tonight on Dipper, naturally, but you cannot finish an honest account of him without turning, for a while, to Mabel from her own side, because the more you understand her arc, the more you understand his, and because there is a tendency in a lot of discussion of this show to treat Mabel as simply the obstacle, the one who gets in the way of Dipper's growing up, the one whose neediness helped trigger the apocalypse, and that reading is both unfair to her and a misunderstanding of what the series is actually doing. Mabel is not an obstacle. She is the other half of the argument, and her fear is every bit as valid as Dipper's ambition, and the show loves her exactly as much as it loves him. Think about what Mabel is actually afraid of, because when you name it plainly, it stops sounding foolish and starts sounding wise. She's afraid that growing up means losing the people you love. She's afraid that time takes things away and does not give them back. She is afraid that the closeness she has with her brother, the thing that has been the ground under her whole life, is fragile and temporary and about to be taken. And the thing is, she is right. She is not wrong about any of that. Growing up does take things away. The particular closeness of childhood does not survive intact into adulthood. The summer really does end and really does not come back. Mabel's terror is not a childish delusion Gravity Falls needs to correct. It is a clear-eyed grasp of a real loss, arriving early, and her whole arc is not about learning that her fear is silly, but about learning to live with a fear that is entirely justified, to face a real loss without letting the fear of it wreck the time she still has. And that reframes the apocalypse, because it means Mabel handing the rift to Bill was not the act of a selfish child, but the act of a person overwhelmed by a grief that turned out to be accurate. She was offered, at her most vulnerable, exactly the thing her justified fear most wanted: a way to stop time, to keep the summer, to keep her brother. And she reached for it, and who among us offered a way to freeze the best time of our lives at the moment we realized it was ending, would have the wisdom to refuse? The series does not condemn her for it, because Gravity Falls understands that her mistake came out of love and fear, not selfishness, and that the demon exploited a wound that anyone would have. And her redemption in the bubble is not learning that she was wrong to want the summer to last. It is learning that a frozen summer, a paradise where nothing changes, is not actually life, is in fact a kind of death, and that the real world, the one where things end and change and hurt, is the only place love actually happens, because love needs time and loss to mean anything. Mabel chooses to leave paradise, chooses the real broken world over the perfect fake one, and that is as large a piece of growing up as anything Dipper does. The reason all of this matters for understanding Dipper is that it shows you the two of them are not hero and obstacle, but two people making the same journey from opposite starting points and arriving in the end at the same place. Dipper starts out desperate to grow up and has to learn what he is not willing to sacrifice to it. Mabel starts out desperate not to grow up and has to learn that she cannot freeze time without killing the very thing she is trying to protect. They meet in the middle. They both learn that the answer to the terror of change is not to rush toward it recklessly and not to flee from it into fantasy, but to face it together, holding on to each other while letting go of everything else. And the beauty of the twin structure is that neither of them could have gotten there alone. Dipper needed Mabel's fear to teach him what was worth keeping. Mabel needed Dipper's clarity to teach her that the fake summer was a trap. Each was the other's teacher, and the lesson each taught was the exact thing the other was missing. There is a generosity in how the series handles this that I keep admiring, because it would have been so easy to make one twin right and the other wrong. To make the show a story about how Dipper needs to escape his clingy sister, or a story about how Mabel needs to protect her reckless brother, and instead it made both of them right and both of them wrong in equal measure, made each of their instincts both a strength and a danger, and refused to pick a favorite. That balance is what elevates the twin relationship from a plot engine to a genuine piece of wisdom about how people grow, which is that we do it best in pairs, in the friction between someone who pulls forward and someone who holds back, and that the goal is not for one to win, but for both to change, to meet somewhere neither could have reached alone. Dipper is a better person at the end of the series because of Mabel, and not just because he loves her, but because her way of seeing the world corrected his, softened it, reminded him constantly of the things his ambition would have let him forget. He would have been a colder, lonelier, more Ford-like person without her, and he knows it. And choosing her at the end is in part choosing the version of himself that she makes possible. One of the pleasures of a show built as carefully as this one is that it becomes a different experience the second time through. And Dipper's story in particular changes shape on a rewatch, because so much of what he does in the first season is happening in front of a truth he does not know, and you, the first time, did not know either. Once you understand who Grunkle Stan really is, once you know about the portal in the basement and the brother lost between dimensions and the 30-year con, every early scene with Stan acquires a second layer, a whole hidden emotional life running underneath the comedy. And Dipper's relationship to the old man reads completely differently. Consider what it means on a rewatch to watch Dipper treat Stan as a buffoon, an obstacle, a cheapskate to be managed, when you now know that this man is secretly carrying the largest and most painful secret imaginable, is spending every night in a hidden basement working on a machine to bring back the brother he lost, is grieving and guilty and desperate under the gruff exterior the twins take at face value. The first time through, you laugh at Stan along with Dipper. The second time through, you see the loneliness the boy cannot see. The way the old man's grumpiness is armor over an ocean of pain, and Dipper's obliviousness to it becomes almost unbearable because you want to tell him, look closer, this man is not what you think. There is something enormous he is carrying and you are walking right past it. And that is exactly the series' method turned on its own protagonist, because Dipper's whole thing is looking closer, seeing what others miss. And the great irony of the first season is that the biggest mystery in his life is not in the woods, it is in the house. It is the man across the breakfast table, and he does not see it because it is too close and too disguised, and because he has decided he already understands Stan. That irony is, I think, one of the subtly sophisticated things Gravity Falls does with Dipper, because it uses him to say something true about how mystery actually works in a life, which is that the things we most fail to understand are usually not the exotic distant ones, but the near ones, the people right beside us whom we have decided we already know. Dipper can decode a Visionaire cipher, but he cannot read his own great uncle, because he has filed Stan under a category con man, cheapskate, obstacle, and stopped looking. The monsters in the woods get his full attention, and the mystery in his own home goes unexamined for a whole season. And there is a lesson in that about the limits of even the hungriest, most curious mind, the way we save our wonder for the strange and withhold it from the familiar, when the familiar is often where the deepest secrets are. When the truth about Stan finally breaks, it is a rebuke to Dipper's whole method as much as a revelation, a reminder that the person you think you have figured out is the person you have most likely stopped seeing. The Wendy scenes read differently on a rewatch too, because knowing that the crush is never going to be requited changes the texture of every hopeful moment, gives the whole arc a gentle melancholy the first viewing does not have. The first time, you might root for it, might hope. The second time, you know, and so every one of Dipper's schemes to win her, every small hope, is shadowed by the knowledge of how it ends, and it becomes less a will they won't they, and more a portrait of a boy loving someone he cannot have, which is what it always was, but which is easier to see once you know the ending. And rather than making the scenes sadder in a bad way, this deepens them, because you stop watching for the outcome and start watching the boy, the specific texture of his hope and his effort and his eventual grace. And it becomes a study in something universal, the first big love that does not work out, rendered with a tenderness that only fully lands once you have stopped hoping for a different ending and started appreciating the one you get. And the largest thing that changes on a rewatch is the presence of Bill, because once you know how central he becomes, his early appearances take on a menace they did not have the first time. That first meeting in Stan's mind, the cheerful triangle making his casual threats, plays as a fun villain of the week the first time and as a chilling piece of foreshadowing the second, because you now know that this being is watching the whole time, is playing a game across the entire series, is patient in a way that nothing else in the series is patient, and that everything that happens is happening under his eye. Little details you missed become sinister, moments that seemed like coincidence become manipulation. The whole show tightens into something more designed and more dreadful, and Dipper's obliviousness to the scale of what he is up against becomes its own kind of suspense. The suspense of watching someone you care about walk through a story whose real shape they cannot see. That is the mark of a show that was fully planned rather than improvised, that it supports and rewards this kind of second reading, and it is another way in which Dipper functions as the audience's proxy. Because rewatching Gravity Falls, catching the things you missed, seeing the design you could not see the first time, is the ultimate version of the activity the character embodies, the patient re-examination that turns a mystery into an understanding. The show wants you to rewatch it the way Dipper rereads the journal, and it hides enough on the first pass to make the second pass a genuine discovery, I have been talking about Dipper in fairly heavy terms all night, the anxiety, the growing up, the melancholy under the summer, and that is all true, and it is the deep architecture of the character, but I would be giving you a distorted picture if I did not stop and say plainly that Gravity Falls is, moment to moment, one of the funniest shows of its era, and that Dipper is much of the reason. The seriousness I keep pointing at is real, but it is carried on top of a river of genuine comedy, and the two things are not in tension, they enable each other. Because Gravity Falls earns its sad moments by being so consistently, warmly funny the rest of the time that you let your guard down and then it hits you. Dipper's particular flavor of funny is the comedy of the kid who takes everything too seriously, the earnest one, the one whose intensity about small things is inherently ridiculous. He commits completely to whatever he is doing, whether it is impressing Wendy or hunting a monster or maintaining his dignity in front of the teenagers. And the gap between the enormous seriousness he brings and the often small stakes of the situation is a reliable engine of comedy. He is funny the way earnest people are funny, not because he is making jokes, but because his whole being is a little too much for the moment he is in, and the series knows exactly how to play that, how to let his overinvestment tip into absurdity. Paired with Mabel, whose comedy is the opposite, pure, uninhibited chaos, spontaneity, joy with no filter, the two of them make a deeply great comic duo, the tightly wound one and the completely unwound one, each making the other funnier by contrast. And his voice performance is a huge part of it, because Jason Ritter's Dipper has this quality of barely contained panic that is funny in itself, the way his voice climbs and cracks when things go wrong, the way you can hear him trying to sound calm and failing. The specific music of a kid who is in over his head and pretending not to be. So much of the comedy is in the delivery, in the exact way a line about being terrified is read with a thin veneer of false composure over obvious terror, and it makes Dipper endearing in a way that a purely competent hero never could be, because you're always a little bit laughing at him and a lot rooting for him at the same time, which is exactly the relationship you have with someone you love who is having a hard time keeping it together. The thing I want to point out about the comedy, though, is that it is never at Dipper's expense in a cruel way, and this is a distinction that matters because there is a kind of kid show comedy that works by humiliating its protagonist, by making the child the butt of the joke, and Gravity Falls almost never does that. The comedy comes from Dipper's earnestness, yes, and sometimes from his failures, but the series is always laughing with a kind of affection, always on his side even when it is laughing at him. And it never leaves him actually humiliated, never uses his dignity as the punchline in a way that makes you wince for him rather than laugh with him. That affection is the difference between comedy that builds a character and comedy that erodes one, and Gravity Falls consistently chooses the kind that builds, so that after 2 seasons of laughing at Dipper's overinvestment and panic and schemes, you love him more rather than less, because the laughter was never contempt, it was recognition, the warm laughter of seeing yourself in someone and finding it funny and lovable rather than shameful. And the comedy is load-bearing for the sadness in a way I think is worth understanding, because Gravity Falls could not land its emotional gut punches if it had not spent so long being funny. When something sincerely painful happens, the apprenticeship crisis, the bubble, Stan's erased mind, it hits so hard precisely because you have spent so many hours laughing. Because the show has trained you to be at ease, to expect warmth and jokes, and then it pulls the floor out. A show that was heavy all the time would numb you to its own weight. Gravity Falls stays light, mostly, buoyant, silly, funny, and it uses that lightness as the setup for the moments when it turns serious, so that the seriousness arrives as a surprise, a sudden depth in water you thought was shallow. Dipper is the fulcrum of that because he is both the comic center and the emotional center, the one you laugh at and the one you cry for. And the series moves him between those registers with a control that most live-action drama cannot manage. To be able to make an audience laugh at a character and then, minutes later, break their heart with the same character and have both land fully is a rare skill, and Gravity Falls had it, and Dipper is the proof. The deepest thing Gravity Falls is about, underneath the monsters and the ciphers and the demon, is the ending of childhood, and I want to spend a little while on that theme directly, because Dipper is the character through whom the story says most of what it has to say about it, and it is a theme the series handles with more honesty and more courage than almost anything else made for children. Most stories aimed at kids are careful to reassure, to promise that things will be okay, that nothing precious will be lost. And Gravity Falls, for all its warmth, does not offer that reassurance, because it is fundamentally a story about loss, about the fact that the summer ends and childhood ends and you cannot keep them. And the only comfort it offers is not that you get to keep the thing, but that the thing was real while you had it. That is a plainly adult idea to build a children's show around. The idea that the value of something is not diminished by its ending, that a summer is not made pointless by September, that the fact that you cannot hold on to a time forever does not mean the time meant nothing, and in fact might mean it meant everything, because the things that last forever are cheap and the things that end are precious. The whole shape of the series, the countdown to the birthday, the summer running out, the last day, is designed to make you feel the ending coming, to make you grieve it in advance the way Mabel grieves it, and then to teach you, through Dipper, that the way to meet a precious thing ending is not to try to freeze it, which kills it, and not to pretend it does not hurt, which is a lie, but to be fully present in it while it lasts and to carry it with you after, changed by having had it. Dipper embodies this because his arc is precisely the arc of learning to let go without letting go of what matters. He wants to rush toward the future, and the series teaches him that rushing costs you the present, that in his hurry to grow up, he was skipping past the very things that make being a kid worth it. The closeness with his sister, the safety of not yet having to be anything, the last easy days before everything gets complicated. And Mabel wants to freeze the present, and the show teaches her that freezing it is a kind of death, that the summer only means something because it ends, that a paradise where nothing changes is not paradise at all. Both of them are learning the same lesson from opposite sides, which is how to hold a precious, impermanent thing correctly, neither gripping it so hard you crush it, nor refusing to let it end. And the answer they both arrive at is presence and then acceptance, being all the way in it while it happens and then letting it become memory, which is the only thing any of us can actually do with the good times, and which Gravity Falls models with a grace that has helped a lot of people, I think, with griefs much larger than the end of a summer. Because here is what I believe the series is really preparing its young audience for, gently, without ever saying it. It is preparing them for the fact that they will lose things, that everyone does, that growing up is a long series of doors closing behind you. Childhood, then adolescence, then youth, each precious, each temporary, each impossible to keep. And it is offering them a way to bear that, a posture toward loss, which is the posture Dipper learns, which is to love things fully while you have them and to let them go with grace when the time comes, and to trust that having had them was worth the pain of losing them. That is, when you strip it all the way down, a piece of genuine wisdom about how to be a person in a world where everything ends. And the fact that Gravity Falls delivers it through a cartoon about a boy fighting gnomes does not make it less wise, it makes it more remarkable. That a show could carry something that true inside a form so playful, could teach kids how to grieve without ever seeming to teach them anything at all. And the ending, the twins on the bus, is the final statement of it, because it is a departure, a loss, the end of the best summer of their lives, and it is not tragic, it is bittersweet, which is a much harder and truer note to hit. The summer is over, they are leaving, they will never have exactly this again, this town, these people, this age, this particular closeness. And they are okay, more than okay, because they had it, because it was real, because they carry it with them, changed, and because they have each other, still, going forward into whatever comes. Gravity Falls does not pretend the loss is not a loss. It just insists that the loss is survivable, that it is the price of having had something worth losing, and that a life is made of exactly these precious, impermanent summers, held and then released, over and over until the end. Dipper Pines learns that at 13, on a bus, leaving a town he will love for the rest of his life, and it is the last and largest thing the series teaches him, and through him, us. I opened tonight with the fact that the show never says his real name, and now that we have been all the way through him, I want to come back to that, because his names, all of them, turn out to trace the whole shape of his story. And I think there is a small, quiet poem hidden in them if you line them up. He has 3 names, in a sense, Mason, the real one, the one on the birth certificate, the one the series keeps hidden. Dipper, the nickname, the one everyone uses, the one that comes from the birthmark he keeps covered. And Pines, the surname, the family name, the one he shares with his sister and his great-uncles and everyone who matters. And the movement of his story runs right through those three names in a way that is almost too neat to be accidental. Start with Mason, hidden under the hat, the way the birthmark is hidden under the bangs. The real name is the secret self, the one he does not show. And it is fitting that a boy so preoccupied with how he is seen, so anxious to control the version of himself that other people get, would keep his truest name tucked away out of sight, would move through the world under a nickname, a slightly more casual, slightly more chosen identity than the one he was given. There is a whole psychology in the fact that we never hear Mason, that even Gravity Falls, even the story itself, respects his instinct to keep the deepest layer covered. He is a kid who hides, we said at the start, and the hidden name is the proof, the innermost thing, guarded. Then Dipper, the name that comes from the mark he is ashamed of, and there is something poignant in that too, because the nickname that becomes his whole identity is derived from the exact feature he most wants to conceal. The birthmark embarrasses him. He hides it. And yet the name that grows out of it becomes the name he loves, the name that means him, the name his sister says with affection and his friends say with respect, so that the thing he was ashamed of becomes, through the alchemy of being loved, the source of his truest name, the one that actually fits. That is a lovely small lesson buried in a nickname, that the things about ourselves we are most ashamed of, the marks we try to hide, are often exactly the things the people who love us turn into terms of endearment, so that what shamed you in private becomes what you are cherished by in public. And then Pines, the family name, and this is where the supplementary materials hint, the one I flagged as uncertain, becomes so resonant even though we cannot confirm the details, because the suggestion that adult Dipper might dream of legally becoming simply Pines, of being defined by the surname above all, is the perfect endpoint for the arc, even if we have to hold it loosely. Think about it. He starts hiding behind Mason, guarding his innermost self. He lives as Dipper, the name born from a mark he was ashamed of, transformed by love into his identity. And the direction he is heading, the thing his whole story points toward, is Pines, the family, the name that says he belongs to these people, that his deepest identity is not the private hidden self, and not even the individual nickname, but the bond, the belonging, the fact of being one of the Pines, one of the twins, one of the family that chose each other against everything. The boy who spent his childhood trying to become someone impressive on his own ends up understanding that who he most wants to be is simply part of them. And the name arc, if the hint holds, spells that out, from the hidden private self to the individual to the family, from Mason to Dipper to Pines. I want to be honest that I am reading a lot into a set of names and a hint from a book, and that the adult name change is not confirmed canon, only suggested, so take the neatness of it as interpretation rather than fact. But the underlying movement is real, is on screen, is the actual arc of the character regardless of what he does with his legal name as an adult, because the whole show is the story of a boy learning that his identity is not something he builds alone in secret, out of achievements and impressiveness, but something he receives through belonging, through love, through being one of a pair and one of a family. Dipper arrives in Gravity Falls, a kid trying to become somebody. He leaves it a kid who has understood that he already is somebody, that he was somebody all along, not because of anything he accomplished, but because of who loves him and whom he loves, and that the surname he shares with his sister is worth more than any name he could have made for himself. The hidden self under the hat learns over one summer that the self worth having is the one that is connected to other people. And whatever he calls himself as a man, that is who he became. There's one more thing about the names that I find quietly perfect, which is that the pine tree, his symbol, the emblem on his hat from the very first frame, is right there in the family name. Pines. The tree is the name and the name is the tree, and it has been sitting on his head the entire series. The sign of the family he belongs to, worn like a crown he did not know he was wearing. From the first second you see him, the answer to his whole arc is stitched onto his cap. The pine tree, the pines, the belonging he spends the summer learning to accept. The series told you who he was before he could tell you himself, we said at the start, and this is the fullest version of that. That the emblem of his family was on his forehead the whole time, and that becoming himself meant, in the end, growing into the name he had been wearing all along. When people talk about a character being an audience surrogate, they usually mean it as a mild criticism, a way of saying the character's a blank, a camera on legs, a nobody the viewer can project onto because there is nothing much there. Dipper is an audience surrogate in the opposite and much harder sense. He is the way in, the ordinary person standing in the middle of the impossible, the one whose reactions match yours. And yet he is not a blank at all. He is among the more sharply drawn characters in the whole show. And the trick of him, the actually difficult thing the writing pulls off, is that he is both at once, both the everyman you step into and a particular boy you could never mistake for anyone else. That balance is why Gravity Falls works as well as it does, because you need both. If Dipper were a blank, you could project onto him, but you would not love him, you would not grieve his choices, the ending would not land. And if he were only a specific, quirky, fully external character, you could love him, but you could not inhabit him, could not feel the town's strangeness through his eyes, could not be scared with him and thrilled with him. Gravity Falls needed a protagonist who was porous enough to climb inside and solid enough to care about, and it built one, a kid whose anxieties are universal enough that almost anyone can find themselves in them, and specific enough that he is unmistakably a person. You watch through his eyes, and you also watch him simultaneously, and that double vision is the engine of the whole emotional experience. And what you find when you are inside him is a particular way of being brave that I think is the truest gift the character gives, because it is a bravery available to the powerless. Dipper has no special abilities. He is small, he is weak, he is scared, he is a child among adults and monsters and gods. Everything that threatens him is bigger than he is. And he matters anyway, he wins anyway, not by acquiring power, but by refusing to be paralyzed by his lack of it. By using the only things he has, attention, persistence, cleverness, and above all, love, the willingness to keep showing up for the people he cares about no matter how outmatched he is. That is a model of heroism that a real, ordinary, unpowered person can actually use, because it does not require you to be extraordinary, it requires you to be observant and stubborn and loyal, which are things anyone can choose. Dipper is proof inside the fiction that the ordinary virtues are enough, that you do not need to be the strongest or the most powerful to be the one who saves the day, that a scared kid who pays attention and refuses to give up on the people he loves can stand against literally the end of the world and win. I think that is why, of all the things the show gave people, the thing they carry most is not the plot or the mysteries, but Dipper himself, the felt sense of him, because he taught a whole audience that the anxious, overthinking, unremarkable-seeming kid they might have been or might have felt like was not disqualified from heroism, was in fact perfectly equipped for it, just not the flashy kind. The kind of heroism Dipper models is quiet and unglamorous and available to everyone, and it consists mostly of caring enough to keep going, of loving people enough to be brave for them, of refusing to look away from the truth even when the truth is frightening. Those are not superpowers, those are choices, and the series insists, through him, that they are the choices that actually matter, that the world is not saved by the powerful but by the persistent, not by the fearless but by the loving, not by the extraordinary but by the ordinary person who decides, scared and small, to do the right thing anyway. There's a version of Dipper that I sometimes imagine, the version a more cynical show would have made, where his intelligence makes him superior, where his cleverness is a kind of smugness, where he is the smartest one in the room and knows it, and the series wants you to admire him for it. That Dipper would be insufferable, and more to the point, he would be useless as a model, because being the smartest one in the room is not a thing most people get to be. The actual Dipper is so much better and so much more useful than that, because his intelligence is bundled with humility and fear and constant self-doubt. Because he is smart and still gets things wrong, smart and still needs saving, smart and still, in the end, wins not through his intelligence, but through his heart. Gravity Falls is careful, over and over, to show that his cleverness alone is never enough, that his best moments come when he sets the cleverness aside and simply loves someone, chooses someone, protects someone. And that is the final correction the series makes to the fantasy of the boy genius, the insistence that being smart is not the point, that being good is the point, and that the smartest thing Dipper ever does is realize that his sister is worth more than every mystery he could ever solve. If I had to name the single thing about Dipper Pines that I admire most, the one choice that I think defines him more than any other, it would not be a moment of bravery against a monster, and it would not be a clever solution to a mystery. It would be the apprenticeship, the turning down of it. Because that is the moment where he refuses the story he was being offered, and refusing the story you are offered is, I have come to believe, one of the hardest and most important things a person ever does. Consider what Ford offered him. Not just a job, not just a chance to stay in a town he loved. Ford offered Dipper a narrative, a complete and flattering story about who he was and who he was going to be. You are special, the story went. You are the chosen one, the gifted mind, the destined protector, the next great investigator. Stay here and become the hero you were always meant to be. And that story was aimed with perfect precision at everything Dipper had wanted his whole life. To be seen as special, to matter, to be taken seriously, to be more than the overlooked younger twin. It was the exact story his deepest insecurity had been begging the world to tell him, and it was being handed to him by the person he admired most, and all he had to do to accept it was let his sister go home without him. And he said no. He looked at the most seductive story anyone could have offered him, the story of his own specialness, and he set it down because he understood at 12 years old that a story about how special you are is worth nothing if you have to be alone inside it. That is an astonishing thing for a character that young to do. And I do not think it gets enough credit because the culture around us is absolutely saturated with the opposite message. The message that you should chase your specialness, follow your destiny, become the extraordinary person you are meant to be. And that the people who hold you back from that are obstacles to be left behind. Ford is what that message looks like when it wins, the man who followed his specialness all the way to the top of a lonely mountain and found nothing there but a demon who had been waiting to exploit exactly his isolation. And Dipper offered the same path, the same flattering story, looked at where it led and chose the ordinary thing instead, the going home, the staying with his sister, the being one of the family rather than the special one set apart. He chose connection over destiny, and the show frames that correctly as the braver and wiser choice, as the choice that saves him from becoming Ford. I find that unmistakably moving, and I find it calmly radical, because it is a children's show telling children that the story about how special they are is a trap, that the goal of a life is not to become extraordinary and set apart, but to stay connected, to belong, to love and be loved, and that anyone offering you greatness at the price of the people you love is offering you a bad deal no matter how brilliant they are. That is the opposite of what most stories tell kids. Most stories tell kids to embrace their destiny, to become the chosen one, to rise above the ordinary. Gravity Falls tells them to be careful of that story, to notice what it costs, to see that the ordinary life full of love might be worth more than the extraordinary life spent alone. And it makes that argument through a 12-year-old boy turning down the exact thing every other story would have told him to grab with both hands. That is the take I want to leave you with about Dipper, that his greatest heroism was a refusal, that the bravest thing he did was decline to become the hero he was offered the chance to be, because he understood that the offer would have cost him the only thing that actually mattered. And it works, it lands, it does not feel like a lecture, because Gravity Falls earned it. Because it spent 40 episodes making you feel the pull of both things, the seduction of specialness and the warmth of belonging, and it let Dipper truly want both, really struggle, honestly be tempted, so that when he finally chose, the choice had weight, cost something, meant something. A lesser show would have made the apprenticeship obviously evil, made Ford a villain, made the choice easy. Gravity Falls made the apprenticeship genuinely appealing, made Ford deeply admirable, made the temptation real, and then let Dipper turn it down anyway, out of love. And that is why it is the emotional peak of the whole series, because it is a real sacrifice of a real good for a greater good, which is the only kind of choice that actually tells you who a person is. So that is who Dipper Pines is when you put all of it together. A frightened, clever, anxious kid who arrived in a strange town wanting desperately to be older and more impressive than he was, who spent a summer learning that the things he was chasing, the coolness, the specialness, the being taken seriously, were worth less than the things he already had: the sister, the family, the love, and who offered the chance to become the extraordinary lonely person he thought he wanted to be, chose instead to stay ordinary and connected and whole. He is the boy who read to the end of the book, who paid attention when no one else would, who was scared the whole time and brave the whole time, and who at the last understood that the smartest person in the world is a fool if he ends up alone, and chose with his whole heart not to be. That is the entire story of Dipper Pines, and I think it is one of the best and truest stories anyone has ever told in the shape of a cartoon about a boy in a pine tree hat. It has been a long walk through one small boy's summer, and if you have stayed with me this far, whether you are still awake or drifting somewhere near the edge of sleep, I hope it has been a gentle place to rest, because there is something restful, I think, in spending time with a story this carefully made and this deeply kind, a story that took a cartoon about monsters and hidden codes and used it to say true and comforting things about being young and being scared and growing up and letting go. Gravity Falls has settled, in the years since it ended, into a strange and lovely place in the culture, the kind of place reserved for the few shows that were exactly what they needed to be, and then had the wisdom to stop. It ran for only 2 seasons, 40 episodes, and it did not overstay, did not dilute itself, did not keep going until the magic wore thin, and because of that, it has stayed whole, stayed perfect, stayed the same complete and self-contained thing it was on the day it ended. A whole generation grew up on it, learned to break ciphers because of it, learned something about loss and love and courage because of it, and passed it down so that new kids keep discovering it, keep finding the journal in the woods for the first time, keep meeting Dipper as a stranger and leaving him a friend. That is a kind of immortality most stories never get. To keep being found, to keep meaning something to people who were not even born when it aired, and Gravity Falls has it, and it earned it. And at the center of it, holding it together, is that small, anxious boy in the pine tree hat, who I think is one of the more strangely perfect characters ever written for children. Not because he is impressive, but because he is true, because his fear is real, and his bravery is real, and his love is real. And because the choice he makes at the end to set down the story of his own greatness and go home with the people he loves is a choice I wish more of us were brave enough to make. He arrived wanting to be older, and he left having learned that the thing worth growing into is not someone impressive and alone, but someone connected and whole, someone who belongs. He is the boy who put his sister above the whole world and got to keep them both because it turned out that choosing her was how he saved the world in the first place. So wherever you are right now, however close to sleep, I hope you carry a little of that with you. The small comfort of a story that ends bittersweetly and okay. A summer that ends and is not lost. A boy who grows up without growing away. Rest easy. The journal is still out there in the woods, and the summer was real while it lasted, and that was always enough. Thank you for spending this time with me here at Pine Hat, and for letting these long, quiet nights be part of how you fall asleep. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.